You have entered the Chronic's rabbit hole. And hello, beautiful people. Welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Kyle, aka Chronic, and I am very excited to check out this video today. It's going to be a deep dive. This is the Sewol Ferry Tragedy, with the coward captain leaving 350 students to die in a sinking ship. This is from Rotten Mango. Y'all suggested this on the Patreon to let me know that this is the best way to dive into this tragedy. We found out about this tragedy through the Spring Day music video from BTS. That was honestly just soul wrenching what went on. The song's really good itself, but then we did a couple deep dives on what the music video connection is to this fairy tragedy. But now we're actually getting a deep dive into what actually happened from this amazing documentary. Thank you so much for sticking around with me. This is going to be a long one, so bring your drinks, bring your snacks, bring your tissues in case you need it too, because this one's going to be a doozy. If you hear anything in the background, that's just a lovely family upstairs. Alana and the two boys are cleaning up the house while making a mess as they do it. Just being so alive. And honestly, after checking out the Sewol Ferry tragedy, I feel blessed to have them upstairs making noise, because none of these parents have their kids now. And that's really, really, really sad. And this coward captain and everything else that went on that was despicable definitely needs a shine, because everyone who gets embarrassed and are a coward never want to have the lights on them. But this time we're finding out exactly what happened while giving memorial to all the students that did pass away. I don't know anything about Rotten Mangoes, this girl, so please let me know everything about her. Also, thank you all for the support on the channel. If this is the first time that you've seen me, hello, my name is Kyle again. And if you do know me probably from the BTS Spring Day, that's also probably why you're here too. So if you have seen this video and you're spending time with me for this long one, again, I thank you so much. But if this is your first time and you find out some crazy information that you want to elaborate on or anything like that, that somehow is not spoken about in this 2-hour video, let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you did have a good time. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other reactions like this. Now, we are doing the Sewol Ferry Tragedy. Coward captain left 350 students to die in a sinking ship. I thought it was 304, so maybe it is 350. We'll find out legit right now.
Bada bing, bada bing.
This is going to be a long one, and it's going to be a tough one, okay? We're talking about the Sewol tragedy, the sinking of the Sewol boat. Now, two 16-year-old students from Tanwon High School, they made headlines. There were some rumors that they were dating. There were some rumors that said, no, they were just close friends. But most of the students that knew both of them personally said they barely knew each other. I don't even think that they had a class together. Most kids said that was the extent of their interaction, just passing each other in the hallways. Yet the two of them found each other alone in a room, in a boat, terrified. I mean, they're watching the water starting to pool on the ground, and they didn't know what to do. I'm sure they were frantic. I'm sure that there were a lot of things going on in their minds. I'm sure that they were trying to comfort each other. But eventually, everything goes black. A civilian diver would later find both their bodies alone in that room, and their life jacket cords were still tied together. He remembers how he had to separate them because he physically couldn't bring up two bodies at once. And he recognized that in their last moments, maybe these two kids knew each other, maybe they didn't, but in their last moments, they didn't want to be alone. So they tied the strings of their life jackets together till the very end. And he said, you know, I started crying thinking that I didn't want to separate them, but I had to.
Oh my gosh.
He said it was one of the hardest rescue dives that he had ever endured in his entire life. He would never forget some of the stuff that was seen. Other students from the same high school, Tanwon High School, faced similar fate.
First of all, the ability to lay out this story like this amazing human is doing right now. Kudos to her, the strength and courage it takes to bring this out. I know if Alana was down here and just heard that first story alone, it would have been tears everywhere. So the fact that she is staying strong for us, I'm going to try to stay strong for us too. But that is heavy. Could you imagine the diver coming down and not wanting to do his own job because you can see that desperation and that despair that they went through, but then also that, well, at least we have each other in this moment because I'm alone and scared. And he didn't even want to separate it. What a what a way to start this image, because that's the perfect way to image what actually happened. Those two kids that didn't know each other that are now tied together in this moment of just panic and fear. Wow, what a way to start this, y'all. Here we go. What an intro.
A female student was seen throwing a chair at a window, a glass window, and she's hurling this chair with as much force as she can muster. She would go as far back as she could, and then she would throw it with all of her strength, and it would just clunk onto the window and fall back down. She wasn't angry, but there was just pure desperation in her eyes.
Yeah.
She could see on the very other side of this window were rescuers.
Oh my gosh.
They saw her, she saw them, and they did nothing but stare at her.
Why?
What?
I still don't
Why?
get it.
We're going to get into it. I mean, this rescue, I don't even think you can call it a
Wait,
rescue.
did someone just say what? Why?
She saw them, and they did nothing but stare at her.
What? Why?
We're going to get into it.
I thought that was
this
in my own head.
I don't even think you can call it a rescue. She realized that these people, these rescuers, they're not here to save her.
What?
All the people that she thought would be responsible for her safety, the captain of the boat, the rescue teams from the Korean National Coast Guard, they all abandoned her. They were watching her through the window, and it was very clear to her in her last moments that she
my
was being left
gosh.
to die. Imagine these are the
That's
very last
so
realizations that you
depressing.
have in your life. April
Gut-wrenching.
16th, 2014.
Gut
This Sewol
wrenching. We have too much. We just know too much. We're too self-aware. So that despair of seeing what should be your help being stranded, and then it's just choosing to not come. I honestly don't know that pain, because I have had people come through for me my whole life. So, oh my God, just this despair in every single story, every person, not just like, you can't think about them as a group. You have to think about how individually each painful thing that they've left, and how sorrowful each story is for each person. She's gonna go into everything here.
ferry capsized off the coast of South Korea. There were 476 passengers.
476.
Most of them were high school students around the age of 16 years old
Oh my
from the
God.
same high school.
Just a
They
little
were
over
on their
100
way to
made it.
Jeju Island when their boat started sinking on one side. And when
Wow,
a
so it
giant
just
boat that
tipped.
carries 500 passengers, when it starts sinking, it's not something that goes unnoticed,
Yeah.
nor is it something that happens very quickly. Soon, nearby boats and vessels and even countries start giving out lending helping hands. The Japanese Coast Guard asked if South Korea required assistance because they were right there. The U.S. Navy had a massive vessel stationed nearby and offered to rush to the scene to help with rescue efforts. South Korea denied all of their requests.
Why?
They told news outlets that they had everything under control, that they were operating a full-scale rescue operation, and that majority of the passengers had already been rescued off the boat and they're being rushed to safety.
Wow.
South Korea
Who is she talking to? One, and I think it's really cool to have that little feedback there, because you're not always doing a reaction channel to get that feedback, because this makes no sense to me. I don't get the pride and the greed mixed into this tragedy. US and Japan were ready to help, and you denied both of them. And then you told everyone it's because you already had a full-scale rescue going, and most of them are already out. Oh my God.
told the world, hey, guys, these are our kids, and we're going to do everything to save our kids. But that could not have been further from the
From
truth.
the truth, you got that
The
right.
Sewol Ferry Tragedy in South Korea would lead to the deaths of over 250 high school students, over 300 lives in total. It would
Wow.
lead to the president being impeached, the prime minister resigning, the Korean Coast Guard being disbanded, multiple high-profile arrests, a billionaire suspicious suicide, a helicopter crash, hunger strikes, and a vice principal of a high school found hanging from a tree in the woods,
Woo!
dead.
Oh
So
my! How does the world not know about this tragedy more? Oh,
Get into the tragedy.
what an intro. God. Sorry for pausing that intro so much. You rotten mango, you. You
As
know what
always,
you're doing.
show notes are available at rottenmangopodcast.com.
Cool.
There's a South Korean news outlet called Newstapa, which you're like, I've never heard of this. I've heard of like SBS and NBC. Newstapa worked closely with the victims' families and their attorneys from the get-go.
Good.
They had so much information on this tragedy that was being suppressed by mainstream news.
Rough.
They were the only ones that were standing up when everyone else was silent. It's estimated and kind of surmised that without them, most of the evidence, most of these testimonies would have been completely lost. They would have
Oh my
never
God,
been
they were
used.
going to bury it with
So
the
that was
shit.
my primary source because they worked directly with the families to get the truth out there.
Wow.
And, this isn't just a tragedy.
This is direct.
It's a full-scale cover-up
This is
with the president, the most powerful person in that country, working with the media. So please go show
Rough.
support to Newstapa if you can. And with that being said, let's get into it.
Okay,
The
let's
parents
get
of
in.
Tanwon High School are getting bombarded with calls. Phone calls, text messages, voice memos, pictures are being sent to them. And it was like a parent's worst nightmare. Think about your 16-year-old kid aboard a boat on a school field trip, and they're sending you cryptic text messages like, Mom, I'm sending you this because I'm scared I might not be able to say it later.
Oh my
But I
God.
love you.
What?
You're like, what's going on? You're
and
like,
parents
on a
are
field
getting
trip.
some of this too?
Another kid sent, hope we can meet again alive. Another student
Oh
said, if I've wronged any of you guys, please forgive me. The parents start freaking out, but they're told by their kids that, hey, Mom, Dad, the boat is sinking, but rescue.
Oh my God. Like, my son Avery, who's 14, he's just about to go for not necessarily a field trip, but it technically is. He has a class that kind of gets them camping and hiking and all these different things. So there's risk involved with it. So you had to like sign a waiver and go meet the teacher and all that stuff too. I can't then imagine hearing at this, say, camping trip that maybe they decided to go on a raft on the river or something like that and all the kids drown. And all of a sudden they're trying to cover it up, what type of a feeling I would be going through. It's just insane, let alone if I got a message from my son before that happened to then only feel the anger more after knowing what happens. Thank God there was a news outlet that was pushing this out. That's why independent news and honestly, like things like reaction channels need to stay alive so that everyone could still have a voice amongst these, because you only need someone like a Rotten Mango to put out a production like this to get around to millions and then word to mouth from this. It's crazy. This happened in 2014, y'all. This is something that we all should have heard in this day and age.
Efforts are on their way. I think everyone's got it under control. They told us to stay in our cabins and put on our life jackets. Many parents told their kids, okay, well, stick with your friends. Don't be alone. Don't wander out alone. And good. That's good. They have everything under control. Just keep calm and do what they say. Do what they say.
Do what they say.
If you listen to them, everything will be okay. These words will haunt the parents forever.
God, these
A
are
lot
real
of them
words.
couldn't even face living with the guilt because so many children would die from listening to what they said, from listening to what the captain told them to do. The ferry sank April 16th of 2014, but the story starts the day before on April 15th of 2014. So the students at Tanwon High School, this is like their annual trip to Jeju Island. They considered it a rite of passage, like a tradition for everyone. Every single high school student it's the sophomore class. They're so excited for this because, for one, their parents aren't going to be there. It's just their class and a couple of teachers. And I mean, just imagine the adrenaline and all this planning that goes into something like this. Any inconvenience that day that would have otherwise bothered the crap out of them, It didn't bother them anymore. I mean, they were waiting in line for hours at the port of Incheon, which is also where the international airport is. So Jeju Island is like the Hawaii of South Korea.
Oh,
and
wow.
Incheon is actually on the northern side of South Korea. And they would get on a
Good to
boat,
see.
go all the way down the left coast of South Korea, and then get into the ocean, the Yellow Sea a little bit, and then they'll hit a tiny little island called Jeju Island. It is the biggest destination spot for South Koreans. It's
Looks
beautiful.
lovely.
It's like a cultural mecca. There's so much, there's a lot of fun stuff to do there.
That's
these
so
kids are like,
cool.
yes, Jeju Island. Even when their ferry is delayed for 2.5 hours because of foggy conditions, they're like, that's fine. Are you kidding? Nothing is going to ruin this trip. This is the best trip of my life. It's a 300-mile trip by ferry. It takes 14 hours.
That's a long
But
go.
thankfully, they would be going down the coast of Korea most of the time, the left side of the coast. So they're going to have cell service, and it was outfitted like a cruise ship, meaning that there's dorm rooms with bunk beds. There's communal showers, a convenience store, a cafeteria, which for high schoolers, this sounds like a blast.
No kidding.
Because they had cell service, a lot of them were able to reach out to their families, and those very phones would later document some of their last moments on board. There were 476 people on board the ferry, including the crew. Now, they board the ferry at 9 p.m.
I must say, I want to know y'all that knew this through BTS's Spring Day, or did you know this from the actual news sources around the world? Because I think a lot of people must have found this through BTS with Spring Day. But if not, and this is how you found out, the way that she's laying this out, it's so much more cryptic than anything can really put into context in less than 20 minutes. You need 2 hours to fully elaborate the depravity and the steps and the domino effects that had to happen for this pain that everyone's still feeling. And I really respect that she's wearing kind of the yellow in reflection to that yellow ribbon that is to commemorate what they went through for South Korea there. So again, I'm loving what she's doing here too. So amongst this pain, and I'm getting mad. I'm really getting mad. As a dad here, my fists are clenching, and just the frustration that I feel for these parents. God, it's ungodly.
They were supposed to board 2.5 hours earlier, but like I said, a delay. It's not that bad. I mean, the ferry is filled
First
with
sign of something.
325 high school students, 14 teachers, 29 crew members, and about 100 or so other passengers. So these passengers are going to Jeju either on their own for vacation,
Right.
or there were
So
a
they're
lot
mixed
of
with some
truck drivers.
vacationers and truck
So
drivers.
they go and they get cargo
I was
off
a
from
truck
the same
driver
boat, and they
growing up.
drive it around Jeju. Then they get their truck back onto the boat and come back to Seoul, and it's like a back and forth, right? So
Sounds like a huge boat.
oh yeah, it's a massive boat. Here, can you pass me my iPad? I'm gonna show you pictures.
So you're saying there's not only people, but also like vehicles on there.
Oh, so many vehicles, and it's actually a cargo ship. This is a cargo ship that
Whoa.
loads on passengers on the side. The Sewol Ferry, if you want to get technical, is 75%
cargo
profits
ship.
from cargo movement and 25% profits from carrying of passengers. Most of the pictures you're gonna find now.
Now, knowing that context, knowing it's 75% supplies, 25% human traffic that you're moving, that makes a lot of sense why the government's extremely tied to it, because it's literally a cargo ship. Oh, God.
Are of it sinking, but here is it before it sank.
Oh wow.
That looks a lot
It's
like the ferries
Like
from
a cruise ship.
like a
our
cruise ship.
Yes,
Wow.
it's
island,
massive.
honestly.
So, I mean, a lot of these truck drivers were not very excited that they got onto the ferry with a bunch of high schoolers.
No kidding.
But these same truck drivers would help try and save a lot of these students later. So it's not like the high school bought out the entire ferry, nor was it a ferry that belonged to the school. There's a lot of people on here. So all 476 people,
That's good to
including
know.
the crew, they board the ferry and they start their journey. Now, the night of the 15th was pretty calm. Okay, so this is a picture that the kids posted.
Wow, she has everything.
Taken by one of the victims. Just of them boarding during the foggy night. And it just looks like they're so excited. And nothing climactic happens, which is good. Dinner is served. There's fireworks that are launched from the deck. And there's pictures of that too. At night, the passengers, they all go to sleep in their cabins. Now, the high school was pretty good about booking rooms on one level for all of the boy students and then for the girl students upstairs, right? So they had different levels. They all go to
Nice.
sleep around 11ish, and the next morning at around 11 a.m., they should be arriving in Jeju Island. So it's like you go to
Oh.
sleep, you wake up, you have breakfast,
You
and
should be
11
there.
a.m. you're at Jeju. They're
Yeah.
so excited for this. Now, 7:30 a.m. is when everything starts to slowly unravel.
Oh,
Hellsman Cho and
pit.
Third Mate Park.
It's getting
So
in
these
there.
are two of the people that are going to be steering the boat now. They take over for the shift so the overnight crew can go into their cabins and take a nap or go to sleep. The helmsman is the person who's going to be steering and driving the ship, if you will. So Helmsman Cho, he's at the bridge, which is basically like the cockpit of the boat. And he's, doing all these commands. And the captain was off duty in his room.
Okay, so the bridge is the driving room.
Yes.
Okay.
30 minutes later, around 8 a.m., breakfast is served in the cafeteria for all the passengers, the crew, and anybody else. 8:20 a.m., autopilot is switched off to manual steering.
Okay.
Autopilot off, manual steering on. Just 7 minutes later, this Sewol is sailing through the Mengol Channel. Now, the Mengol Channel is very pertinent to this story. There are other routes to take to get to Jeju without going through this particular channel. I mean, it really only saves like 7 miles off of your trip, but this channel it's not some sort of urban legend where ships go missing and it's like a terrifying place. It is a commonly used route, but it's not calm. It's not that safe. It's a little unpredictable.
Commonly used, but it's not calm. I'm gonna have to use that a lot. And again, when you're a greedy person, you look for shortcuts. So even them looking for this shortcut that might potentially be the reason why they end up tipping. That just to save 7 miles, and I think what they said was like a 300-mile thing. Like, no offense, try to go the easier route when you got that much cargo.
It actually has one of the most rapid and unpredictable currents in the Korean peninsula.
Oh, jeez.
It's got these tidal shifts, meaning that you have to be super, super careful when you're passing through this channel. Some areas of the channel have rock hazards. Some random areas have shallow waters. But Sewol was traveling through a part where it was pretty calm. Conditions were relatively calm. Even CCTV footage shows kids and truck drivers socializing on deck, finishing up their breakfast. Most of the kids were still asleep in their cabins, if I'm being honest, because, it's very early. As of 8:40 a.m., everything is going well. Students are busy. Passengers are busy avoiding the students. Crew members are busy working. Within 9 minutes, everything would change.
Jeez.
8:49 a.m. Two crew members that were in charge of steering the ship decide to manually steer the ship 15 degrees to the left.
Okay.
Which is a well-known fact to all crew members aboard this Sewol that they cannot steer this particular vessel more than 5 degrees in any direction.
And they did 15.
Mainly because of the amount of cargo it
Well,
was
yeah.
holding. So why did this Sewol ferry even start to sink? This Sewol was known, like I said, to be a cargo ship. 25% of their profits were just from passengers. So being incredibly irresponsible and greedy, they would almost every single time load way more cargo than was legally allowed.
I bet.
It caused massive dangerous conditions on the boat. And when they made this sharp turn, which is supposed to only be 5 degrees to the left, they
3
went
times
15
as hard.
degrees. And
Jeez.
none of this cargo, none of these cars, they had almost 200 vehicles on this cargo ship. All of them slammed to the left because none of them are being tied down.
And none of them were
Side
tied
note,
down?
when you read official reports, it'll read that the boat was listing 30 degrees to port. Now, what that means, and this is from online research, I'm not like a boat girl. I'm actually terrified of cruises, but listing, when a boat is listing, it means that it's leaning to the left.
Okay.
Not going to the left, but leaning to the left. When it says listing to port, it means to the left. When it says listing to starboat, it means listing to the right.
Makes sense.
You say listing how much degree?
30 degrees.
30 degrees.
Yes.
That's a lot.
30 degrees. And not to confuse it with trimming, okay? Just a little quick, I guess, boat lesson. But trimming is when the ship tips forward or backward.
Okay.
And then rolling is when a ship is moving from side to side trying to find balance. So these are terms that you'll see a lot in the official report.
Makes sense.
At one point, it was rolling to try and find balance. But ultimately, it was listing to the left, 30 degrees. None of this is great.
No.
But 30 degrees list doesn't mean capsizing. It doesn't automatically mean it.
Right.
And
Okay.
it gets technical, but I'm going to try and describe it as best as possible.
She is doing an incredible job. This is so educational. That's another reason why I wanted to check this out, because if it has this many views, it was going to have a lot more than just information about what happened. It was going to be like literally a teaching lesson. And I'm so happy that she has someone to kind of bounce her ideas off of, and it really keeps her engaged, because we all know how hard it is sometimes to think by yourself on your toes. So I think this is really helping her stay incredibly engaged for this task. And the beginning part was laid out so much, it got so emotional. Now that we're getting to the nitty and gritty, it almost feels like we're ready to go to war for exposing what really happened here. And again, she's even now we all know how boats work, and she's saying it in a way that everyone can understand, and it makes you not feel stupid. So just very wise. And again, just could you imagine all of the vehicles slamming to the one side, which is left? I know when I've been on a ferry, we're never planting our vehicles down with anything. We're not tying any of the vehicles down when I park in there too. So I wonder if anything like that has ever happened near where I'm from. So crazy again.
If the cargo had been tied down, it probably might have balanced the boat back out. The boat might have rolled and then eventually become stable again. Now, even if it didn't become stable again, there is something called ballast water. Okay, this is
Ballast
going to get
water.
very technical.
Okay.
All boats want to have a low center of gravity.
Okay.
The parts closest to the water needs to be the center of gravity. So did you know most boats are filled with water?
Yes.
It sounds counterintuitive, but
Nope.
it's something called ballast water,
Yeah.
which is
That
just
makes
to
sense.
bring the center of gravity, right?
Yeah.
They had like no ballast water. The center of gravity was at the top of the boat.
Oh no.
Why? Oh, so they can
That's
load more
gonna
cars.
Yes. So,
So they
there's
could
no way
load
that
more
this boat
Oh my
is gonna fix itself, balance itself out. No way. Let me show you some footage.
Loses
I can
buoyancy.
envision it as, sometimes you throw a boat on the water, it will float. And then I'm just imagining filling that boat to the brim of sinking and floating.
Yes.
So it's like anything moves, it will start sink.
Precisely. That's literally what
Jeez.
this boat is doing. This is from Black Box when the boat leaned initially.
Do we get to see it?
So this is also why it's so pertinent that when you're aboard a boat or a plane, they're tying down all the cargo. That's why
Right.
they're so particular about it. If you've ever brought your car on a boat, they tie it down. So all
That's funny, because that's exactly what I just said that they don't do. And if they do it, I guess I've just never seen it, because I've been in my car the whole time and I've just never noticed that. But that's really what's going through my mind now too. And I'm gonna have to look into the ferries here to see if they had anything like that, because I'm glad you just said that. Most of the vehicles and cargo are tied down.
all of this cargo, all of these vehicles slam to the left, and this boat is not going to balance out. This boat is 100% going to capsize, meaning it's going to sink. Now, the water is very cold in April. It was about
Yeah.
54 degrees Fahrenheit. It only takes 10 minutes for you to start feeling the effects of hypothermia. You're not going to die in 10 minutes, but most of the time. But you start feeling loss of dexterity. Your fingers go numb. You're starting to, your teeth are clattering. And full-blown hypothermia happens after about 2 hours. So right at this moment, the boat leans, and the engines of the boat are cut. The off-duty Captain Lee Chun-seok, he starts
There he
running.
is.
He's like, I got to figure out what's going on. Some crew members also run to the bridge of the boat, and they're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Now, they're trying to assess the situation. And when a boat this size starts to list or even starts sinking, it's not like an earthquake. Not every single passenger is going to jerk up and go, we need to evacuate this boat.
course.
It feels dangerous, but it almost feels like turbulence on a plane. You feel like, okay, I need to wait it out and it's going to be fine. You never really hit turbulence and you're like, this plane is going down. So that's kind
You
of
hope
how
not.
everyone was feeling except for the crew, because they knew better.
Right.
8:52 a.m., just 2 minutes after the boat starts leaning to the left about 30 degrees, an emergency call is made by a student, Choi Tok-ha. Choi reported that the Sewol was starting to capsize. He was the first 911 call.
Wow.
And that the water was coming into the decks.
The
He's like, this is
kids.
something's going on. I'm on the decks and this is dangerous. He was one of the few that understood the severity of the situation.
Right.
And he was probably confused because he could hear ringing through the PA system, like the intercom system, the speakers on the boats.
Yeah.
Do not move. Just stay where you are.
What?
It's dangerous if you move. Stay where you are.
Oh my God. So I'm not trying to give the devil his due here, but maybe they're actually thinking now at this point that everything's sinking down, that if the kids start moving, that will cause the boat to just completely go down even faster or something. I doubt it. I think they're just looking for themselves here too. And I'm very glad that there was a kid that saw it and called and made sure that someone took the initiative. And it's not like you have to be a hero, y'all, all the time, but if you just notice there's danger coming, reporting the danger is all you have to do to start the movement. And the fact that they just told them to not move again, I don't think I ever will understand it, even if it's fully explained. I think that's why this is such a intense story, because there's no real reason to what happened here.
Every single student and passenger was told to stay put. And now all hell breaks loose. Crew members are calling so many different people. There's the Jeju Vessel Traffic Service, Korean Coast Guard, Jeju Coast Guard, Mokpo Coast Guard Station, their company executives. There's so many different people that this communication system is just bonkers. The fact that they don't have a system in place of like, if an emergency happens, this is who I call, is crazy to me. Nobody was getting anything done. So much time initially is wasted in these key moments.
Yeah.
At 9:07 a.m., the crew confirmed to authorities the ferry is capsizing, and they confirmed that they needed help from the Korean Coast Guard. They stated the ship's angle made evacuation impossible.
Are you serious?
Now, here's where it gets crazy. Allegedly, none of these authorities knew that there were 500 passengers on this, well, close to 500 passengers on this boat. That's what they claim. I don't believe it for a second,
No.
but that's what they claim.
Wait,
So
who
they-
claimed that? The
All the
police?
Coast Guards, yeah.
The
They're
Coast
like, no
Guards?
one told us. We just thought it was the crew. We thought it was a cargo ship. Get out of here, because this Sewol was well known to be a passenger cargo ship. So they say the ferry is about to roll over, meaning it was listing to the left, but because it was taking in so much water, it was practically bonk flat onto the left, and now it was going to flip
Then
over
it's
and
gonna flip.
capsize.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's not even sinking just to the bottom
Animation
like
of
this. It's
how
going to
it-
be
wow.
completely inverted. The bottom is going to be
Okay, so it fully
the
flipped
Coast
and
Guard
then
tells
went.
the crew on Sewol to
Jeez,
inform
there's
any
no way to
passengers,
save
if there are
that.
any, to put on their life jackets. But they just say, oh, sorry, our PA system is down. It wasn't down.
What?
It's just bizarre.
They don't want to
Okay.
cause
Why did they
panic?
lie?
Yeah, so it was like down at one point, but then it comes back up, and then a customer service rep is like playing that, or like a customers relations crew member is playing the message of like, do not move. There was like no communication. Now the Coast Guard is like, okay, well, if it's down, then go personally tell the passengers. The crew member is like, okay, I'm gonna do that.
I'm just thinking like how things work. If you're inside of a boat, I know like a life jacket is like going to help you swim, but if you're stuck, I don't know how much a life jacket's going to help you if you even need to swim. You might need to like swim through the water to get through like a hole to get out or something. I almost think putting on the life jackets could be dangerous at this point. I could be wrong here. That's just how I'm thinking. So I think what she's alluding to is they just didn't have a real plan, and they didn't know how to address this. And when you are thinking too optimistically and never plan for any storm or anything that's coming, that's the corruption in life. We think it's Mother Nature a lot of the times, but a lot of the times it's just us not planning and seeing what could have happened.
He walks out of the command center and walks around a bit and comes back being like, I did that. He did not do that. He just
not.
lied. He just blatantly lied to authorities and said, yeah, I told all the passengers to put on their life jackets.
What?
Yeah.
Do they not understand what the hell's going on?
No, they do not. The Coast Guard tries to tell Captain Lee that you need to start thinking and acting fast. They have deployed a vessel. There was a patrol vessel nearby that was coming in about 10 minutes. There was a helicopter that would get there in about 1 minute. And Lee said, yeah, that's not enough to save everybody. Like there's more passengers than that. Because one helicopter, you could save maybe a dozen people max. No, maybe like 6, 7 people. Keep this part in mind. Because later, everyone goes and says, oh, when he said passengers, we thought maybe a couple of passengers.
Wow. I
Are
mean,
you
right now, everything
serious?
falls on the captain, right?
Oh, yeah. But
Everything
Going
falls on
down,
the captain
like,
right now.
What are you doing? Every second, what are you
Yes,
doing?
Exactly. And you're going to die when you find out what he was doing. So
No.
the passengers up until this point are still being told to stay where they are and do not move. And some of the very first people rescued was the captain and a few of his crew.
그러나 구조당국이 가장 먼저 구조한 사람은
The captain and the crew were the first to be
The
rescued.
captain was rescued by one of the small Coast Guard boats, and he wore ordinary clothes to disguise himself as a passenger.
Oh my
What?
God.
Once he was rescued, he made no attempts, and he actually was rescued. I don't want to say before the chaos because right now is chaos. But he was rescued at a point where it wasn't just utter all hell breaks loose and there are people drowning and dying right now. He's like, okay, well, I think chaos is about to hit, so I'm going to leave.
That's so fucking despicable.
Yes.
So fucking
Yeah,
despicable.
he's actually one of the most hated people in all of South Korea. The whole nation. He's alive. He disguised himself as a passenger, and once he was rescued, this is even more despicable. He gets on the Coast Guard vessel, and he doesn't let anyone know that he is the captain and that he has vital information that would help them in rescuing passengers. He doesn't relay any information to them when time and information is the most important thing to save lives. He made no attempts to tell them how many passengers, where they were, what the PA system was doing. He did none of that. He didn't tell them that they were being told to stay in their rooms where they were effectively trapped inside this sinking boat. None of that. There is about 20 minutes of footage from some of the kids' last moments.
Why, when you have vital information, would you not tell people? That's why I've always been told evil things happen because good people allow it honestly to happen most of the time. You can see this one. This is a person that had the information, left early before shit hits the fan, and then get someone to come in as like almost a spy to take them out so that they're not going to be accountable for grabbing everyone else. Like, this makes no sense. It almost feels planned, but like it can't be planned. Obviously, you wouldn't want to waste all this stuff, but like, wow, humans are interesting creatures when push comes to shove.
And one of the biggest, I guess, video files that were actually shared by the father of the victim. And he said that he wanted the world to know what actually happened to these kids.
Good.
So it was filmed by a Park Soo-hyung and Kim Dong-hyuk. They were both 16, best friends. They were both on the level 3 of the boat, which is where most of the male students were dorming. These rooms had bunk beds, about 4 boys per room. Soo-hyun and Dong-hyuk, they were 2 of the last ones to start the day. They're hanging out in the cabin, sitting on the edge of their cabin, like bunk bed, when they suddenly feel the boat lurch to the left. And at first, everyone's confused, but like I said, it feels like airplane turbulence. They're not freaking out yet. Then they start overhearing the speakers starting blaring. Do not move, stay put. It's dangerous if you move, just stay where you are. If you're watching the video on YouTube or Spotify, I'm going to play you a clip of the video. You can actually hear the PA system in the background repeating, stay where you are, over and over again.
아 기울어졌어. 야 나 좀 살려줘.
현재 자리에서 움직이지 마시고 안전으로 잡고 대기해 주시기 바랍니다.
이거 상황이 아니야. 이거 실제라고. 와 기울 줄은 상상도 못했다. 이게 뭔 상황인지 모르겠어. 구명조끼 입으라는 거 침몰되고 있다는 소리 아니야?
Does
So
that mean
the
the
boys
ship
on the
is
third floor are
sinking?
freaking
Yeah.
out. Some students who were on the deck
Jeez.
come to the cabins to let everyone know to put on their life jackets. The video footage from these students are stitched together to be about 20 minutes, but it's probably the most raw footage I've ever seen in my life. Like, it's not necessarily the most emotional in the typical sense, meaning these kids aren't crying, they're not banging on the windows to get out, but you just see how real and relatable the situation is. Like the way that these kids, at first, they don't think the ship is going to sink, because who thinks that? You know, they're kind of joking around, but they're putting faith in the adults and the captain and the PA system, and they're kind of playing around with each other. And I find that it's a way that they're coping with it.
Gosh.
And then eventually you hear that humor kind of dissipate, and it gets replaced by them saying, I don't want to die.
Yeah.
But they're still trying to keep this almost cool front in front of their friends. You can hear other kids trying to check up on their friends and contacting their family members back home on their phones. But near the end, you can hear and see most of them start to feel very, very scared. You hear students say things like, will the water really leak in? The shaking is getting serious. It's tilting so much this way, I can't even move. This is getting ridiculous. I want to get off. I really want to leave. Am I going to die? It's not going to go down any further, right? Like, what the hell is going on? Hurry and rescue us. What's wrong with these people? I don't understand what's happening. If they're telling us to wear life vests, does that mean the ship is sinking?
진짜 침대는 막걸리는 거 장난 아니야. 아 내리고 싶어 진짜 진심이야. 자꾸 바뀌었어 우리 죽었어. 나 이거 뭘 꺼내? 아니 뭘 꺼내? 뒤지기 싫어요. 엄마한테 전화해볼까?
Should I call my mom? Oh.
나도 집에 고장났어. 피한 게 없어요. 그럼 일단 엄마 아빠 사랑해요. 내 동생 어떨까? 내 동생 말은 절대로 가스tran에 가.
Don't ever let him go on a school trip.
살려줘. 엄마 사랑해요. 아빠 사랑해요. 둘 다 사랑해요. 센세 어딨어?
Near the end, one of the students even screams, let me live. Who's going to take care of my mom and sister? Let me live. And now all throughout...
Let me live suggests that they feel trapped and they know something is wrong here and not the correct thing is happening. Should I call my mom? One of the kids said. Oh, man. Don't let my brother go on a school trip. Like I was just saying, in my mind, what it would make you think of. Oh, gosh. This is raw. Like she said here. And again, I'm going to quickly look real quick to see if I can even see her name. Maybe it's Stephanie. If maybe it is, but she is she's doing so well, and you can tell when she's like holding back tears even, because how can you not? Like for me, I'm getting just so much anger out of this one, where at first it was so emotional, but now it's just turned into like, how dare they? This guy's still alive. Where does he live now? Like, why is no one making his life horrible? How come nothing happened from this? Like, man, if we're back in the days of pirates, imagine a captain doing that. What would have happened to him? Like, geez, they're pirates themselves with all this cargo that they were putting on that was way more than they should have. And just, it's so interesting to see the raw footage of people and kids the moment before even the real mayhem began. Like she was saying, the captain left before the real mess even started beginning there. So you can see all the kids here just anticipating what shit's about to happen. And we know what happens here. So let's keep this rolling. This is a tough one, y'all. So I can understand if this one's a tough pill to swallow for y'all. So if it is, keep sipping back something to help you get by on this one.
Let me live. Who's going to take care of my mom and sister? Let me live. And now all throughout this, you hear the PA system in the back. Dear passengers, a guidance announcement. Those of you who are inside the ship, please do not move. Try to find a pole you can hold on to. The kids also note that they start smelling something very bad. They wonder out loud if it's gas because it smells like boiled eggs, which is typically a gas leak scent.
Mm-hmm. Who's talking in the system?
Just, it's like an automated message.
Oh, it's an automated.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's automated.
Talking.
Oh, yeah, no. Most of the crew are like, bye.
Here's a button. They press a button and then they dipped.
Uh-huh.
Press a button and dip.
And it's very heartbreaking because you just hear that playing while these kids are repeating, we don't want to die. So more phone calls were placed between passengers and police. The students are even telling the police, please, the ship is sinking. I don't want to die. We've been told to stay put. We're not supposed to move. Another student can be heard saying, really, once the water starts coming in, we really got to get out. And another student says, no, like it says we shouldn't move.
That
there are a few
predicament.
things to gather from these students' last moments.
That's a lot
They're
to gather.
trying to stay strong. They're
Yeah.
trying to keep each other company. And if you listen and you speak Korean and you listen to the whole clip, a lot of these kids are thinking about their families, or a lot of them are asking, wait, has anybody checked on the girls on the other floor? Or has
Wow.
anyone checked on the teachers? Like trying to
They're
see
checking
if
other
their
people
friends
too.
and even their teachers are okay. Some of them were joking around that this was the Titanic and sang the theme song, which I saw a lot of like old people be like, what's wrong with kids? But that's how they cope. They followed the rules. They followed the advice of the adults who they believed were
I
doing
mean, that's what I kept kind of saying. This is like South Korea's Titanic, but at a way more intense scale here and a lot closer to the actual time right now. And we've learned a lot, you would think, since Titanic on how to drive boats. So, yeah.
the right thing. So they stayed put. They trusted the captain. Even teachers were going around dorm to dorm to make sure that these kids didn't go because they thought, again, it was in the best interest and the safety and welfare of the children for them to stay put. One student texted his mom, please, if I don't survive, Mom and Dad, I love you. Another
I never
one
want to hear that.
texted his parents, Mom, Dad, younger sister, I love you guys so much. And please don't ever let my little sister go on a school trip ever.
Please don't ever let
These are some of the kids' last words. So, key points. They're told to stay in their cabin. They're told not to evacuate or come to the deck. They also noticed that some of the zippers on many of the life vests were broken. Not only that, but one of the boys said, I just discovered something really horrible. This life vest says it was made in 1994. Here, look, it's written in the back. Made in 1994.
That's 20
They
years
didn't even
later.
have enough life vests to go around. So a lot of the kids were sacrificing life vests to each other and to their friends. They were asking if the teachers and the girls all had life vests. The videos were captured on Kim Dong-yeop's phone, and he would not make it out alive.
Proud of you
So while
boys
this
for...
is the situation,
I'm proud of the guys there for looking out for their superiors and their teachers, and for their girls, the females, that men should be protecting first. So I'm really happy to know that they were giving off their life jackets for those groups.
inside the boat. Mainstream media at the same time, like imagine this is happening at the same time. Please, just the irony of all of this. Mainstream media starts reporting that all passengers have been rescued.
What?
It sounds stranger than fiction. I don't even know how to explain to you what they thought that they were going to get out of this, what
How did
the
they think they could
politicians
get
thought
out of
was going
this?
to happen when this all came out to be lies and false. But it's insane. If this happened in a movie, it'd be unbelievable.
Yeah.
There were reports that all passengers were rescued. Tanwon High School parents let out a sigh of relief. Oh my God, okay.
Oh,
that
no.
cryptic text, my child is fine. They're probably not responding to my texts or my calls because they're probably on like a Coast Guard vessel right now and they're busy, but that's fine. They start noticing something fishy though. They're trying to get in contact with their children, no responses. They contact other parents and they're like, no, we also haven't gotten any responses. And when they watch the news very carefully, the numbers aren't adding up. And it's not like some sort of conspiracy, but the government would report that they rescued all the passengers. Then a little bit later, they'd be like, okay, well, we have rescued majority of the passengers. Then it'd be like, oh, and these are not the exact figures, but it would be something like, we rescued 200 passengers. And then later they'd be like, we rescued 150 passengers. So which one is it? Who are you rescuing? How do you
Just kept
unrescue
going
people?
down and down.
You're a powerful nation and you can't even do basic arithmetic? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So frustrated, the parents, they start traveling to Chindo Island.
You think
Now,
so?
Chindo Island is the closest island to where the crash happened.
Okay.
Not Jeju Island. Chindo Island is very close
Right.
to the southern tip
Okay.
of South Korea. Jeju Island, you'd have to go further out into the Yellow Sea. The
Good to
parents
know.
all decide to use the Chindo gym to be their coordination place. And I truly don't even know how to explain what I'm going to say next. But first of all, the people organizing this gym to make sure everyone is in the right place were the parents of the children on the boat. They arrived, there's no organization, it's chaos, so they take it upon themselves to make sure everything is organized. Not the Coast Guards, not the local officials, the police, the parents take charge. The rescue teams had these giant whiteboards on the front with a list of names of passengers who have been rescued. And of course, parents are flocking and praying and wishing that it's their child on the list. But these families are getting frustrated. One parent grabs a mic and says, "Here, I can clearly see my younger sister's name on the list of survivors. It says she was rescued, but my sister isn't here. So where is my sister? Who on earth made this list?"
여기 명단에 분명히 제 동생이 있어요. 여기 명단에 분명히 제 동생이 있는데 동생이 여기 없어요. 지금 명단을 누가 작성하셨냐고요?
So these are authorities being like, here's all the people we rescued. And the parents are like, we don't believe you because where are our children then?
상황이라도 좀 알았으면 좋겠는데 상황을 지금 모르니까 지금 불안해서 어떻게 할 수가 없네.
Another parent screamed, "Please, just get us a boat so we can save our kids. Get us a boat. We don't care how much it costs. I will pay for it."
최선을 다하겠습니다.
배도 안 보인대요. 경찰들만 돌고 있고 아무 그거 없대요 지금. 잡수가 없고 지금 그런 상황이거든요.
지금 뭐 얘기로는 지금 뭐 시신도 많이 꺼냈다고 하는데 지금 가요.
Another one said, "I feel like the parents, including myself, are here waiting for our children to die. We want an answer from the person in charge. Why are orders not going through and nothing's being done? You guys are clearly lying and kicking responsibility to others." Another parent screams, "Let's all go together. Let's all go together." The parents are rushed to the harbor, and to show you how they still had this unfailing hope of a parent, they all grabbed blankets on the way out. They said when their kid gets saved, they want to make sure that they have something to keep them warm. They all go to the harbor and they wait. There's nothing that they can do. Side note, police were lined up at the edge of the harbor to prevent family members from going into the water, whether to try and rescue a kid or to in a desperate attempt. A parent screamed, "I want to jump in the water with them. My loved one is under the water. Anger is not enough. If I don't have my younger child, I'm going to jump in the water thinking about my child in the water. How can I as a parent continue to live, eat, and drink? I hate myself." Someone near a mom tried to put one of the blankets on one of the moms because it was so cold. And she cried, "What good is it staying warm when the kids are freezing out there? They're freezing. What good is it for us to stay warm?" Not a single government official was at that harbor.
The anger has turned into a lot of pain now. I must admit, it's... Oh, gosh. It's so well done that it puts you in the shoes of these parents and everyone who is going through this. And it's still so fresh. It's only 11 years ago. Like, it's not even 11 years ago. It's approaching 11 years. So, wow, just that line at the end there that the mom said, like, what good is a blanket for me and staying warm if my child is down there freezing to death? Oh, gosh. This is, it hits deep.
Nobody responded to the family's frustrations or questions.
헬기 탔다길래 난 구조되는 줄 알았어 언니.
No.
우리만 따뜻하면 뭐하냐고요. 애들이 추운데 우리만 따뜻하면 뭐하냐고.
Wait, this is nighttime?
Yeah,
It's been a day?
it's been a day. We're gonna go back into the rescue. Just you wait.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
again,
well said.
I mean, the families resorted to asking reporters on what's going on, but none of the reporters, most of the reporters at the harbor at this point were mainstream media reporters. The only ones there that actually cared about helping the parents was Newstapa,
Was Newstop.
which is why I think a lot of parents continue to work with Mustafa.
Right.
These are some of the most devastating clips I've seen. I mean, just the desperation of these parents, like their grief, their worry, their anger, and so many of them it's a lot.
진짜 가보자. 기자들도 당신들도 타고 현장을 한번 가보자. 제대로 된 정보를 여러분한테 좀 알려주라는 얘기예요, 내 얘기는.
So let's talk about the rescue, because you mentioned, like, how is this nighttime? So the rescue that government officials and media said was a success was not a success at all. The Coast Guard helicopter was dispatched to the sinking ferry at 9:10 a.m. They arrive at around 9:30 a.m. 2 rescuers come down and rescue 6 passengers via helicopter. And these passengers were, like, on the deck. So they're like waving, they're visible, they're outside. Now, at 9:32, the helicopter starts communicating with the Blue House. And the Blue House is like the White House. And they keep asking, is the situation serious? The helicopter says, the ferry is tilted and currently being flooded. It hasn't sunken yet. Can you please send over a video? Now, this is being heavily criticized because time is of the essence.
No
Such
kidding.
an urgent incident is taking place. And
flipped.
really, I don't know what to say because it casually feels like the Blue House is saying, picture it didn't happen. And sure, maybe videos can help them get a better understanding of what's going on. But if this is the government responsible for running a literal company, they better be more competent than this.
Yeah.
They keep calling back to the helicopter, not giving commands, not doing a full-scale command center operation, but going, did you send the videos yet? Just nonstop, over and over and over again, wasting time asking for videos. And what's even crazier is that the helicopter is like, well, we didn't want to take any videos in case it gets leaked.
Wow.
But the Blue House is like, it's fine, text it to my phone.
What?
Here, there's footage.
나간 상황인가요?
지금 현재 지금 일단 배가 좀 기울어서 침수 중이고
예.
아직 침몰은 안 됐고요.
어디 저기 카메라 나오는 건 없죠?
네, 아직 없습니다. 예.
예. 알겠습니다. 바로 연락 주세요.
예.
현지 영상 있습니까? 혹시 나오고요?
예?
현지 영상 볼 수 있는 거 있습니까?
본인 내 외부로 나가지 아마 않을 건데 이게 상당히.
그뭐 대학교 보고 때문에 그런데 영상으로 방식으로 핸드폰 한번 보여주시겠습니까?
The Blue House is basically like, okay, well, we're going to hang up. Just call us back when you get the footage.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, this is like the smallest thing the Blue House messes up. So just you wait. I mean,
Just
the
you
president
wait.
was indirectly impeached because of this incident. So soon after this, the Coast Guard patrol vessel 123 arrives at the ferry. They throw over a raft and they head to the ferry to start their little rescue. Just anytime I say rescue, don't think of it as a rescue.
It's
think
sure
of it in
not.
quotations because it's just a bunch of people acting busy. The first people to
Busybodies.
step into this rescue raft are the captain and crew members. Not all, but a few.
They're like, I'm out.
Yeah, they're like, bye. They have abandoned the ship.
Literally.
But then so does the Coast Guard.
And
The Coast Guard, the vessel, distances itself from the ferry and they try not to enter the ferry, get close to the ferry. They don't try anything. Meanwhile, there's about 3 helicopters that are just circulating, that are just loitering the area, watching.
What's the deal? What's the problem then?
No one's giving them any commands.
So they're all clueless on what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And the captain is like just staying silent.
Yeah. And then the
But
Blue House
why
is
is
like,
no one
well, we can't
pressing
tell you what
him?
to do unless we get a clear HD 4K video. And then all these other authorities, like the Coast Guard, the Mokpo Coast Guard, the Chindo authorities, they're like, well, we don't know what to do. Have you tried calling the Blue House?
Wow.
So everyone's just waiting around. And what's crazy is that there was a US Navy vessel that was nearby that rushed to the scene and they're like, hey, we can help. And the US Navy is so equipped. This vessel had 100 Marines on there.
1,000 Marines?
Marines. South Korea was like, it's fine. We're waiting on a video.
Oh my god. Oh. If I didn't know this information as a parent, then you're finding this out later. Oh my god, I would just be getting even more infuriated. They said no to a U.S. Navy ship with 1,000 Marines on it because they were waiting for a 4K video. And no one knew how to take initiative. Everyone, there's times to follow orders, but then there's also times to stand up for what you believe in or what you see. And sometimes the play is not the play you should run and just go off your gut and go and save the people. God.
The government shut them down?
Yeah, the government was like, it's fine. We're handling it.
Oh my God.
I'm going on a little side note, but another rant. The US vessel, the Navy vessel, actually had helicopters on the vessel and they had launch pads. So basically, they didn't have to go back to land to bring survivors. They could just go back and forth to their vessel that's parked very close to the sinking ferry so they could save an insane number of survivors. 1 or 2 helicopters could just do nonstop back and forth in such short time.
No kidding.
We're gonna dive into the U.S. Navy later
glad
because
she
there's
said
a lot
that.
of a lot of stuff there. Now, anyways,
Jeez.
these are not leisure helicopters either. The helicopters that are circulating the ferry are Coast Guard helicopters, and they make no additional effort. So they saved 6 people initially. That's it. They make no additional efforts to rescue anyone. They later claimed that they had no idea that there were passengers inside. They thought the rescue was over, and they were just surveilling the sinking of the ferry. To sum it up, the rescue teams were just rescuing anyone that comes to the deck where you can visibly see them, but every single passenger was told to stay in their cabins.
Oh my God. I cannot even imagine what that
So, let me get this straight. If they weren't being told and they would have came out, they actually maybe had a chance to be saved. But the people only were going to save you if you got out of the ship. So that's like saying a firefighter is only going to save you once you come outside of the fire in the house on the porch. So he's going to come grab you off the porch and walk you down those couple steps while you got to get out the house while it's burning. Oh my God.
captain was going through at that moment.
But we can't even imagine it because I don't think any of us have such little empathy for human life.
Yeah, like when he got out, does he think that all the kids are going to come onto the deck eventually? Or
does he
he's
think
like
the Coast Guard's going to break in?
Yeah, is he knowingly making a decision? It's like, whatever, I just got to save myself. Let them die.
Okay.
Like, and that's such a good question because, like, I wonder what statement he put out in defense for what happened because this guy just got bombarded by everyone, I'm sure, after this incident. And I'm surprised he's even still alive and no one took in vengeance for themselves for what happened here. But it's hard not to want to think that there was some rational reason as to why maybe they thought the kids would have got out. And I just, you want to rationalize something this evil.
My speculation is probably the last one because I imagine if rescue efforts were made, he would be the last one rescued because that's kind of how it is in maritime communities. But maybe he thought there is a bigger chance he might die. Because I don't know what he was thinking, genuinely. I can't even
I think he just became a coward.
No one is
left.
saving anyone unless they're visibly out on the deck, like waving their arms around in these bright red life jackets. Like I said, the problem is nobody was told to come out onto the deck. The helicopters again claim that they had no reason to believe that there were passengers inside. One helicopter Coast Guard officer, even during an interview, complains, rescue's hard. Because you tell a person that you're rescuing to watch their step, and they don't watch their step, even if you tell them to.
옆에서 말을 해도 안 들고 하물며 어떤 올라갈 때 조심하라고 자세 차랍니다.
아니 그러니까 그거는 알겠는데 그 사람들 상황은 알겠는데 지금 구조템 구조를 하시는 입장에서는 확인해야 되는 인구 같은 게 아닌가.
제가 물어본 것 같아요. 근데 답변이 없죠.
And new step is
I believe I asked, but there was no
that's
answer.
That's not the point here.
Oh my
That's not what
God.
we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that you circled around this sinking ferry and made no attempts to save anyone. They're like, we didn't know there was anyone to save. It's like, why would you even bring that up? It's so bizarre. Nobody asked. Now, the annoying part is the helicopters that are circulating were talking separately with the Blue House. The giant vessel from the Coast Guard was speaking separately with the Blue House as well as the Coast Guard. There was no coordination. It seemed like everything was all hell breaks loose. Nobody knows what they're doing. Blue House is still asking for videos, and the only people that do something to save human lives. Do you see all these little boats? Those are civilian boats and fishermen.
Civilian fishing boats.
They are the ones
The only
that
ones?
took action. They are risking their lives, pulling up straight next to this capsizing, ginormous ferry. And it's very dangerous to get that close to a boat that's capsizing, especially with boats like this. And they're pulling people out of the water. One of the fishermen, Hyun, in the blue boat, He said he saw the boat listing to one side from afar, and he realized that it wasn't balancing itself back out. So he rushes over.
Wow.
He starts rescuing passengers that were jumping into the cold water. And he said it was hell. It was agonizing. There were a lot of people, not enough boats. The people in the water are yelling for help. The ferry was sinking fast. He said he had no idea of how many people he saved, but he was told he saved about 25 people. He said, but I don't know for sure. The people that were trapped inside the ferry couldn't come out. They were just trapped inside the ferry. If everyone was saved, maybe I would feel proud of myself. But there's grieving parents out there, so how can I feel proud? Even though he's one of the civilians saving passengers while the Coast Guard is doing nothing, he lives with guilt for not saving everyone. What's frustrating is when the ferry...
Now, that's what they're going to tell you in this day and age. Don't be a hero, because you still can feel pain during being a hero, because look at all the other people, like these Coast Guards. Well, we didn't even look. We called and no one answered. Well, they're underwater. What the heck? What the actual heck type of an answer is that? We called and they didn't answer. You're in a helicopter, for fuck's sakes. It's ridiculous. And it's needed. I'm glad this is on a YouTube where you actually can sometimes swear, because these are the moments when you need to let it out sometimes instead of hitting something, because that's really, I can't believe these parents didn't come and some of them go to jail for what they wanted to do to get some justice on their own front. It's incredible. Thank God for civilians that take on the role to help someone and carry other people's burdens.
Ferry starts to list. If the captain had ordered everyone to put on a life jacket and get to the dock where they're visible, the likelihood of every single person surviving was incredibly high. The amount of vessels nearby, not just civilian boats and fishermen, but the Coast Guard ships, the U.S. Navy vessels, I mean, the resources of that U.S. Navy vessels, like I said, multiple helicopters, landing decks of the helicopters, over 1,000 Marines ready to assist in air, sea rescue.
1,000?
1,000. Sorry, did I say 100?
You say 100.
1,000.
Yeah.
1,000 Marines. That's how big the U.S. Navy vessel was.
Wow.
They had everything.
1,000 Marines. And I know I'm American, so it might not mean anything because it's just patriotism. But if I'm in the water somewhere, I want these Marines to save me.
That would be the person to
and America and Korea
save
are
you.
on really good terms, so I don't know why they declined for help. But
That
a lot of
makes
people
no
think it's
sense.
President Park was known to have a big ego.
You
and
think?
was very, very self-conscious about international relations, but not in the way that you want your president to be. Not in the way of like, oh, of course we want good international relations, but wanted to look good is all she cared about. So the U.S. Navy vessel just loitered around waiting to be used at any given moment. They're like waiting to be called in because, you know, it'd be a shit show if they just went in there. But the call never came. The rescue could have been so successful.
Well,
And these Marines...
See, but still, see, this is where I am actually apolitical, y'all. I am not nationalistic. I don't subscribe myself actually to a country, though I live in Canada. I love it. I could live anywhere in this world and be happy, in my opinion. Maybe not in complete snow, so on and so forth. But the reason why I hate these things that strap people into becoming too prideful, in my opinion, is, well, the U.S. Navy was there. They had 1,000 Marines. They had all these helicopters and sea and air recovery stuff. Just because you didn't get called, they didn't go. So, and again, I'm not even going to put blame to them either. I'm just saying there's so many people that saw that, and then no one other than these civilian boats took the initiative. But if the civilian boats could do it, wouldn't you have rather have had a quote unquote shit show if you went in without being asked to save a boat from falling down? Because the civilians didn't get in shit for it. So I'm guaranteeing the U.S. Navy wouldn't have gotten in shit for that. That's just ridiculous.
Marines are specifically trained in air sea rescue.
Yeah.
No way.
The Korean Coast Guard, they were more like patrol people. They patrol to make sure that there's no illegal fishermen from other countries fishing in their seas. Most of the Korean Coast Guard was on a job to look for illegal Chinese fishermen, literally. That was their job. So the US Navy, why were they not used? I still don't understand. So one thing that you notice that's a problem is that all of these officials who get paid by the state, by government tax dollars that the civilians pay, they don't want to be the ones to make the call. They don't want to be the ones held accountable. So everyone keeps pushing responsibility onto each other. And that's what resulted in so many of these different vessels and helicopters just waiting around while people are dying.
Ridiculous.
But there are heroes in this story.
There sure
so
is.
do you remember the first emergency call made was by a student, Choi?
Yes, yeah.
He stayed on the phone with emergency services trying to give them the exact location of the sinking ferry.
Wow.
So then they should know there's kids in there.
Yeah, exactly. He tried to give the exact location because, again, I don't know why this was such a problem. I don't know how they didn't know where the exact location was. But remember the 2.5 hour delay? I guess they were thinking the boat was closer to Jeju because they didn't factor in the delay. But they were closer to Jindo Island, so it was a mess.
That's rough.
And Choi, he was sad that he wasn't able to call his parents. The information that he was able to provide to authorities was very crucial.
Really?
Choi's body was found, and his parents were really confused because, you know, a lot of these other kids, they all had cell service and they called their parents, but they never got a call from their son. They were later told that he was the one on the phone with emergency services. And they said, you know, it made sense. We're just so proud of him, and we think that God brought our boy into this world for this purpose, to try and save people. While Captain Lee and a few of the other crew members escaped, there were some crew members who refused. Park Ji-yeon, Chung Hyun-sun, and Kim Gi-won, they stayed aboard the ferry to help the students. All three went down with the sinking boat. Park Ji-young was the youngest part-time worker of the crew. She was just 22 years old. I mean, she's barely older than these high school students. 2 years prior to this, her father passed away and her mom didn't have enough money. So she dropped out of school and started working. She was one of the first to have an easy escape. She was like near the dock. She could hear the kids though, and the PA system was still telling them to stay put. So she runs to the ship, took off her life jacket, gave it to a younger kid nearby who didn't have one. And like I said, she's basically a kid herself. She starts stumbling, running as fast as she can through the halls and yells for the students to evacuate. She's handing out life jackets. She tells them to jump ship. She guides some 50 students to the civilian fishing boats who lift them out of the water and into the boat. One survivor remembers grabbing Park's arm and saying, okay, just come, jump in the water with us. Like, you don't have a life jacket, but I'm going to hold your arm. And she said, after saving you guys, after saving the rest of them, I'll get out. Crew goes out last. And then she just disappeared again to save more kids. She kept going, and the last time someone saw her alive was going deeper into the water where it was already chest level to see if there were more students. Her body was later found floating face down. Still no life jacket. Even in her last moments, she never wore one because there wasn't enough life jackets for both passenger and crew. 2 other crewmates, Chung Hyun-sun and Kim Gi-won, they refused to escape with cowards. They wanted to save the kids. Chung and Kim also could have been very easily rescued, but they decided to go back down and help the children. They were both 28, and they were actually getting married later that year to each other. Their bodies were later found as well, and they had spent their last moments saving children. These 3 part-time crew members would formally be recognized by the government as national martyrs because it was just such a stark
Oh, gosh. No one would, I don't think anyone would wish to become a martyr to save people, but when you're in those positions, that's why, in my opinion, God says you need to have a childlike faith, because look who ended up saving the people. It was the people that could think unrationally in those moments of like, no, you go. I'll go just keep getting people. I'll come after. You know, everyone's already left in my crew, but everyone has to leave. Crew's the last one to be saved always, so I'm going to stay here, even though this girl was only in her 20s as well, even though all her superiors had left. And the fact that they got shouted out as being martyrs, national martyrs, that's really the feeling I was getting in this. It's just like someone was going to have to become a martyr to be the hero in this. And man, life is so beautifully tragic that that's why you have to have heroes there that would rather die with the believers in the people. Oh God, it's just so hard. You get what I mean. Oh gosh. Here we go.
By the government as national martyrs. Because it was just such a stark contrast to the captain and the crew. I mean, most of the crew who were among the first to abandon the ship. Young Daeong was another crew member that went down with the ship. He's 45 years old, and he called his wife, and he told her, "This is where you need to find the savings for our teenage son's college tuition, okay?" And when she tried to plead with him, he told her, "I love you, but I can't talk. I have to go save the kids." His body was found a month later, and his face was unrecognizable, and there was a walkie-talkie found near him. Soo-young was a young teacher, and it was her second year teaching at Tanwon High. She was very young, and it was her first year on the school field trip. When the boat started sinking, she texted her mom, "Mom, the ship is sinking." Her mom called her and was like, "Hurry, put on a life vest," and she responded calmly, "Mom, the students are all wearing life vests," indicating there weren't any more for her. She texted her boyfriend after this and said, "I'm sorry, there's no more life vests. Thank you, and I love you." And he calls her and she says, "I can't, I'm sorry. My battery is low and some of the students still need to call their parents." Her last words were, "I love you, thank you," to her boyfriend. Another teacher was Ko Chang-suk, and Mr. Ko was a PE teacher. Oh my God, this picture. This is the PE teacher. He was a PE teacher for the last decade. And at his old job, before he got to Tanwon, there was actually a fire in the school. And he was given like an award by the school because he ran in head on into the fire to save students from the burning fire. He also went down. And I mean, there was no question what he was going to do. He was going to save the kids. He left behind a loving wife and 2 sons. His body actually wouldn't be recovered until 3 years after the incident. There was a memorial service held for him, and a student came and said, "Mr. Ko could have escaped early, but he stayed to take care of us until the very end." So these are all heroes, and it's not really a heartwarming story, though, where you feel good in the end. You're like, yes, the hero won, because nobody wins. There's like way too many villains in this one to even get close to the number of heroes. There's another story, though, on the boat where a 6-year-old girl, this reminds me of Itaewon, but a 6-year-old girl was there with her parents and her 7-year-old brother. So they were part of the passengers that were going on vacation to Jeju. She was passed one by one from adults to the water to one of the fishermen's boats, all the way. Her parents and her 7-year-old brother would all perish. Everyone worked to get this girl to safety, and she would be the youngest survivor of Sewol. Now, civilians were the only hope for these children because of the government, the authorities, they were doing nothing. Like I said, most of these boats saving these people are civilians.
Just needed a breather.
Fishermen, commercial fishermen, just regular citizens, not government workers. But many civilian divers who saw the news said they were gearing up to volunteer as rescuers. These are like professional divers who have been doing this that want to volunteer to save these kids, right? They know the dangers. They're gearing up. They're coming from Seoul and all these places. But then the news starts flooding that everyone has been rescued. So they're like, oh, okay, I guess I don't have to go. Like, why would I go into the water if everyone's already rescued out of the water? And it wasn't until hours later there were these like rumors and these kind of like fishy things that these volunteer divers were even picking up on. Because, you know, these are people who know how to dive, and the way that the news was reporting these rescues just didn't sound right. So they're like, why don't I just head to Chindo Island and see what's going on? Maybe they need me, maybe they don't. I mean, at least I can try, right? So many precious hours were lost because these civilian divers didn't go at the time because, I mean, nobody's blaming the civilian divers here. They're risking their lives to save others. But the fact that they thought everyone had been rescued, it's just so frustrating how grossly mishandled this was. Many of the civilian divers, they volunteered and they started arriving at around 4 p.m. that day. The boat started sinking at like 9 a.m. They got there around 4 p.m. and they were told to report to a command ship of the Coast Guard that was stationed near the ferry. So these volunteer divers, they don't come to play. They're suiting up, gearing up, mentally preparing themselves, but the Coast Guard is not letting them do their jobs. One of the civilian divers said it was bizarre. I was being walked around this Coast Guard vessel. Like, come here, let me introduce you to my colleague. Oh, and this is my captain here. Oh, and then this is my senior colleague. What did you say your name was? How long have you guys been diving? Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Oh, you know, my colleague is from that area. Do you want to come to the cafeteria? They prepared ramen. This is not an exaggeration. The rescue diver said they prepared ramen and he was so disgusted. He just didn't understand. He saw some of the top dogs aboard this command ship. 2-star Navy officers, chief of the Coast Guard, chief of the West Coast Coast Guard, the chief of the Mokpo Coast Guard, fancy suits and shoes, tip-tapping away on their laptops.
Wait, I'm confused. Like they're not sending people down the water?
No. That's what they're doing, just tip-tapping on their laptops. The ramen was even brought into the conference room for these chiefs to eat. And the diver that was interviewed said he wished he could have recorded the video of these chiefs just digging into these noodles like pigs. They said they ate the ramen noodles, had a meeting for 5 minutes, and then the chiefs were like, well, we got other places to be, so bye. He was sickened to see that the chief of the West Coast Guard went to a press conference like immediately after this, the whole ramen debacle, in his uniform with all of his badges and stated, as of today, 164 vessels, 24 aircraft, 178 special rescue workers are doing our best in conducting a search of the area. The civilian diver had no words. Just no words. But he's not alone. Many of the civilian divers came forward anonymously later to say that the Coast Guard would not let them do their job. And it wasn't even a job, they're volunteering.
Yeah.
Just wouldn't let them do it.
They wouldn't let anyone volunteer at all.
Oh, are you sure that's up to code? Your diving suit? Are you sure? What is it made out of? They're like, what is your deal?
What is
Let
the
us
problem?
go save some children right now. So the parents, now remember how the parents wanted to rent a boat to go out to see for themselves and to save their children. Well, the very first day, a group of the parents do rent a boat and they go to report back to the others what's going on. And one dad screamed, they told us civilians can enter the water, but the Coast Guard can't. What is this?
What?
They're basically saying, oh, you want to dive in and get your kid? Dive in and get your kid, but we can't.
What?
He's screaming, what is this? What is this? The civilian diver, one of the civilian rescue divers, had volunteered to go on the boat with them. Yeah. And he was explaining, like, with these conditions, the Coast Guard should be going in. The conditions are calm. This is like optimal rescue conditions right now.
Wow.
Earlier that day, civilian fishermen would try to break windows to save people.
Right.
But the Coast Guard said, no, we can't do that. So they can't break windows. They can't go into the ferry before it sinks to save people. And now that part of the ferry is sunken, they can't try to rescue people by diving. They can't do anything. What are you doing? Why do you exist?
Why do you
have a job?
Why do you have a job?
A reporter asked a parent who saw the ferry sinking and said, and what are the Coast Guard doing right now? And he says, as of right now, there's nothing they're doing. April 16th was the morning the boat started listing, okay? Now, at 10:52, reporters went out to the scene and still nothing was being done. 10:52 p.m., a whole day had passed.
Like 14 hours later?
Yeah, and nothing was being done. Let me
Oh,
show
wow.
you
Now it's
how
capsized.
calm the waters were.
You're saying 14 hours later the boat's still sinking?
Yeah, it's still actively sinking. and this is like, you need to dive in. So what happens on these boats is time is of the essence. Of course, the golden hour was the first hour and a half that the boat even started listing, way in the morning at like 9 a.m.
No
when
kidding.
the captain was like, tell everyone to stay in their cabins. That was golden hour. Almost everyone could have been saved had they just gotten to the deck. They would have been saved, okay? Now, the next golden time was considered the next 72 hours because there's actually a phenomenon that's quite common where there's air pockets inside of boats.
Yeah.
So these divers need to go in and get these people inside of these air pockets. So if you're in a room where no water has seeped in, which is sometimes possible, you're alive. You have about 72 hours. So these divers need to get down there and hope that there's a lot of air pockets.
Yeah. Even there, if there's one person, they
That's
should be
everything.
doing everything. Yes.
This is how still and calm the water was. Do you see how it's dark? Where are all the Coast Guard vessels? Where are the divers? They should be lit up like a command center. They should be lit up like the 4th of July. This is what it
Like
looked
the 4th of July, you got that right.
Just, it's the most peaceful water. There's no waves really. Nothing. No one's out there. During press conferences, the Coast Guard made it seem like it is pure chaos out there with our rescue efforts. We've got how many ships, how many people? Oh, you guys, South Korea, just you wait. Coast Guard's got you. This is what it looked like. They said the water was as calm as a lake. There wasn't a single wave, but
That
nothing
looks
was
like
being
a
done.
lake.
You could still see the ferry. It hadn't fully capsized yet. There were no rescue efforts. I mean, imagine the anger of the parents seeing that and they can't do anything for their children. They were yelling at their boat to the Coast Guard, do something. They screamed, they're alive, you have to rescue them. The Coast Guard never responded. All they did was circle the Sewol Ferry over and over.
What's their excuses now?
They said that they had to like survey the area. That's like the thing that they constantly say in this whole tragedy is they needed to survey the conditions. They needed to make sure they could go in.
I don't get it. Who's in charge? I'm so confused about.
I'm just beyond confused. And again, why can't anyone take initiative? And if you just keep planning and planning and planning, you're never going to do something. Like, just go and start doing something. But it sounded like a lot of people didn't want to risk their lives that were in the places that were supposed to be the ones risking their lives. And it had to be a civilian rescue. Honestly, it was only civilians coming to rescue. And you don't hear that very often at all, especially in a place like South Korea where you would think now where they're at in their history that this type of corruption wouldn't be happening. But I mean, this type of corruption even happens in America and Canada, all around the world in places that shouldn't be having corruption. So, wow, we're about like halfway through this too. It really was getting heavy there too. Now I've calmed down with my emotions. I feel like I can be strong again. And I know y'all are totally fine with the tears when it comes down too. But a lot of that was just like anger tears as well, just for the injustice. And I know you all have felt this already too and prepared us to make sure we were mentally ready for this. So that's why I am here today. I feel like I'm ready and I can keep going. So let's keep going together.
Coast Guard win.
I don't get it. Who's in charge? I'm so confused about this.
Coast Guard official is saying a different thing,
Yeah.
but all of them have the same message of we're doing everything we can.
Like the Tower
But
of
nobody's
Babel
doing
here.
anything.
Okay, so it sounds like there's someone from the top not letting them do something, right?
So it's speculated. It's not that they were not letting them do something, but they had no idea how to do anything. The Korean Coast Guard was not trained for search and rescue.
They can dive in and
Yeah.
pull people.
So they're like, we're probably going to die. So they were allegedly just telling the Blue House, whatever you're suggesting we do, we're not capable. We can't do it.
Then where's the capable people? Where's the...
But they didn't say we're not capable. They're like, conditions won't let us. The condition is too bad. The condition is too bad. So then I don't think
condition of
South
the
Korea would then
boat?
go to the US and be like, hey, the condition is too bad. Y'all get in there. A lot of these politicians, it was like a balancing game. They want help, but their reputations depend on them not asking for help, whether it's from different departments in Korea, whether it's civilian rescue divers, whether it's the US Navy. They did not want to ask for help, but they themselves did not have the competency to do the search and rescue, but they couldn't admit to that. So they're all just like shifting blame around. So for President Park, I imagine it's embarrassing that you don't have a team of qualified people to do search and rescue in your whole nation. Like,
It's beyond embarrassing because you guys run boats. So if you don't know how to save people in situations that you're putting them in, like, then why do we even have that as an accessible option if you can't be saved out of it? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Imagine the U.S. Navy f***ed up this bad. You don't think America would be like, I guess we're not a cool, powerful nation. I guess we're ass. It's just a lot of like reputation control.
Yeah.
And none of these Coast Guard officials wanted to be the one to do it. Because there's like 5 different Coast Guards. That's another huge problem. It's not like, oh, just U.S. Navy.
Okay.
Because then you have a top dog that's like, okay, well, if the president doesn't want to do anything, I got to at least do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's like the Mokpo Coast Guard, the Coast Guard of the West Coast, the regular Coast Guard. There's so many people involved that they're like, well, let's just see if they
Too
do
many
something.
chefs. They let the food burn.
Because what if we do it and we f it up? Then it's on us. So we just wait. Like, they want to do something, they can do it.
So they're all bystanders.
God.
They're all bystanders.
Bystanders
care more
because they
about their
don't want the
reputation than their
reputation.
careers. Yeah, the parents are screaming, what are you doing? You need to do something, get in the water. And they even screamed, I'm not saying this is easy work, but you need to at least show that you're trying. There are survivors in that ship. What is wrong with you? It's so heartbreaking because a dad on the boat tries to jump into the water and everyone tries to stop him. And what's crazy about this is that the Coast Guard official documents report that they were doing underwater rescue efforts at that exact time that the parents are out there watching them. There was no such thing. So how do your report say that you were doing intensive underwater rescue?
What a mental fuckery they're going through now, too.
They stated that they did rescue all night long, but all they did was get on a little boat and circle the capsizing ferry. At one point, one of the Coast Guards drives up close to it and just like knocks on the ferry. It's like, a parent who saw that said, I can't believe I was inches away from my child and all I could do is helplessly watch him die. So the parents, the reporters on this boat that saw this, they saw the discrepancy of no actual rescue efforts being done. They recorded videos of it, sent it to all the major news network. So the reporters on there were a lot of trusted reporters by parents. Did you know at first the parents were allowed a boat out there by the Coast Guard and it was filled to the brim with mainstream media news reporters?
Are you serious?
There wasn't enough room for parents. The parents forcibly like kicked them out. But just the disgust.
Glad they did.
That these media reporters were like, well, I know that we said 2 seconds ago that we already rescued everyone, but like, can I go take some more pictures out there? So their trusted reporters went out with them and they sent all of these videos to mainstream major news networks. Not a single one of them aired it.
Not a single one
of them talked about the discrepancy.
And they probably weren't
because
allowed.
They were under President Park.
And they were
President
under
Park was
President
known
Park.
as a very, very fascinating woman who loved to bully reporters and mainstream news media.
It sure seems
That
like
was her
it.
thing.
So they're like, this makes her look bad, so we can't post it?
Yeah,
Power
because
hungry
then we're gonna
woman.
be on her
Scary.
list.
Watch out. Don't
That
be
was
on
the
her
very
shit
first
list.
day and night of rescue efforts.
Don't be on her shit list so bad that if you are literally having a tragedy, she's gonna say it will make her look bad, and I don't even want to hear it. Oh, glad she got impeached.
That's all they did. Nothing. I mean, they did nothing. The next day, April 17th, it doesn't get any better. There is still no control tower, no organized operation. Nobody has one person that they're really reporting to. Even the president, President Park, she was MIA for 7 hours, the first 7 hours of the incident. She was nowhere to be found. We're going to get to it later. So the president and the prime minister, they visit the area in Chindo Island where the parents are gathered. Apparently, a boatload of politicians, lawmakers, and parents had gone out on a boat to go visit the Coast Guard. And parents were disgusted. I wish I was eloquent. I wish I could describe to you what kind of emotion that must have been. But the parents said they stood there and they watched the Coast Guard point at maps. They watched the politicians in suits go, It was like watching people pretend to do a job. It was like watching a skit. They felt like they were losing their minds. The Coast Guard is saying things that they know are not true. Like, we worked so hard last night to do underwater rescue. They're pointing at random maps, pointing at pictures of inside the Sewol Ferry. Parents get out onto the dock of the Coast Guard vessel and they see divers go under the surface of the water, kind of like flap around for 5 minutes and then come back out. They said it's like a sick joke. Like everyone's pretending. Like I imagine I would want to shake someone by their shoulders.
Yeah.
Like,
At this
hello?
point, let's get
Can you
into
wake up? Like,
reality.
there's people dying.
Yeah.
The parents decide that they can't trust anyone, so they start their own task forces and have coordinated group chats to relay information in a clean and
What
orderly
denial.
fashion. They were more informed than the Coast Guard. One parent actually confronts a government official who tells him, "We were doing rescues all night." The parent gets in his face and says, "Stop lying and manipulating the news and look me in the eye and tell me you were doing rescues all night." The government official seems shocked and tries to grab his phone and call someone like, we were. The government officials actually seem shocked that the parents have such up-to-date information. I guess they didn't think that the parents would be that coordinated. Like, parents would call them out for every single discrepancy.
Good.
And they were
Glad to
shocked.
hear.
And every single one of them has the same reaction. They're saying something so
That's why
confident.
parents need to be
rescued
loud.
This many people. Oh, this is what we've been doing. The parent confronts them with their lies. They all grab their phone and call someone. One of the parent literally goes, "Why are you lying to me? We have our parents on a boat out there. I just talked to them. That is a blatant lie." The government official goes, and they were at the Coast Guard boat? Oh, and he grabs his phone. "Oh, yeah, 여보세요."
Despicable.
Yeah, despicable. I mean,
Getting flabbergasted from this. Oh my god. This pain. At last, a mother broke down and burst out crying.
now, at that moment, the prime minister shows up at the Chindo gym, and he's second in charge to the president in this country. I guess nobody informed him that the parents are not in the dark on all of this, that the parents are not going to be like, "Thank you, Prime Minister, for your efforts all night long." Because I think he walked in expecting something, some questions, but instead he was chased down and had water bottles thrown at his face. Open water bottles, which I think is symbolic in hindsight.
Yes, it is.
In the end, police protected him and escorted him out. President Park Geun-hye also visited with this whole entourage of security and politicians. Parents were a bit more receptive to her because at the end of the day, this is the most powerful person in the nation. If anyone is going to help them, it's going to be her. So even if they hate her, they can't show it.
You still have to play
But they were
her
let down
game.
once more. She stated, "I just went to the rescue team, and I want to assure you guys all, the government mobilized all resources and personnel to retrieve the victims." The Coast Guard chief also goes up next to the president and claims that he has sent 500 divers to the rescue. The parents know that this is a blatant lie. They are enraged. They start screaming at the chief of the Coast Guard. And side note, there's video of this, and President Park doesn't even seem surprised that the parents are screaming at his lies, almost as if she knows very well herself that those are blatant lies. Because I imagine if I'm the president and my chief just lied to me, I'd be like, why are they booing that? But she looks like she was expecting it. Family said they were straight up stunned at the blatant lies that were being shoved in their face. It was unbelievable.
This is happening.
Also, Park Geun-hye starts using this as an opportunity to say that nobody cares about. Like, their kids are still out there. They want rescue teams. And she states, so what we're going to do with this is an opportunity to conduct a thorough investigation on the cause of the accident and severely punish those involved. That's not what anyone is talking about right now.
Oh my god.
That was the whole second day of the rescue. The second most valuable day. That's how it went. The third day, April 18th,
This is insane.
a lot of developments took place and none of them were good. The Sewol Ferry was...
This is sad. Like this, I'm getting married April 18th this year, and they're still in the bottom of the boat. And it hasn't even fully sunk, and this is April 18th for them 11 years ago almost. So, like, just to think how close it is to the time even we're at. God, it's just... And even the president just being there, knowing the lies are about to be put out, and that fake, sus face that she had to show... It's almost like she doesn't even have empathy left in her body. Like, you could hear that mom screaming in pain. It wasn't just crying. That was like scream crying in pain, agony, and rage. How did no one just like, oh my God, I can't believe people didn't assassinate some of these people. Wow.
Was now fully submerged. Parents went out and they couldn't see the boat anymore and they cried. Government also let a private company step in for rescue efforts. A company called Undyne started to lead the rescue attempts, but it was more of a recovery attempt. It was like a half rescue, half recovery. So there's still a chance that you can live 72 hours in an air pocket, but it was guesstimated that most of the bodies being retrieved would be dead, so it'd be a recovery attempt. Now, they sucked. Undyne sucked so bad. I think that this was just like a government contract bid that won. I don't even understand how they were in control of this.
Really?
Now, the idea from the get-go was the Coast Guard or someone, since the Coast Guard is useless, would inject air into this Sewol Ferry. This is going to help with multiple things. It would hopefully improve its buoyancy, and this is very important because if the boat is fully submerged in water, it's going to start sinking, and divers cannot be in there when it's sinking to the bottom.
Yeah,
so they need it to somewhat still be near the surface of the water, makes it easier for rescue or recovery. And if there is human life, injecting air could help those air pockets survive longer. That's what Undyne was here to do. The Coast Guard couldn't do it clearly, so Undyne is here. They should have done this like first thing when rescue started, but the Coast Guard didn't have the tools. So on the third day, they're like, we're bringing in a private sector. Okay, we're bringing in the private sector. Undyne's going to do this. And Undyne comes in with these massive air compressors. They're old. They're industrial use, not compatible with human life.
What?
Meaning if you injected this into a room, you'd probably kill the people in the room.
Oh my God.
The air is like auto gas air. And they're super old and outdated. I mean, what? But Undyne Marine shows up with these compressors, like with their full chest. They're like, yeah, these are the ones. Like, are you not even ashamed? Not only do they not have the proper equipment, but they also don't have the experience. Again, the U.S. Navy was nearby and offered their assistance once more. They said, we have new compressors, and we also have qualified professionals that utilize these compressors and have done rescue efforts such as this one. They were denied. South Korea said, thank you though. But no. This day also marked the first discovery or recovery of bodies. 3 bodies were recovered by civilian divers, but mainstream media said all of it was due to Undyne. Undyne recovered these bodies, and that makes me so mad because these civilian divers gave up a lot to help. Wow. They were not part of the Navy or the Coast Guard. They were moms and dads, corporate employees, professional divers in other industries. They were stay-at-home parents. The only thing that these divers had in common was that they liked to dive, they were good at it, and they wanted to help people. So they left their homes and their families to drive to this southern part of Korea to do the most important dive of their lives.
No kidding.
Many of these civilian divers would end up permanently injured, paralyzed, traumatized, depressed, and some would even lose their lives because of this dive.
Wow.
They told each other, minimize shock when you're down there. Shock is no good for anyone. Yes. The divers all made a pact to not look the students in the eye. Because once you do that, you will never be the same, and it'll make it harder for you to go back down underwater. They talked about how it was the hardest thing. The ones that drowned, they would have to recover their bodies, right? So their families could put them to rest. But there was so much debris in the water because think about this big ship. There's so much things falling apart. Walls were collapsing and the hallways became narrower than your shoulder width. A lot of them had to squeeze through hallways. Bad weather delayed the use of a diving bell, so they had to use these super flimsy, flexible air hoses. But if they're twisting and turning in there, it could easily snap, break, or it could be folded to a point where they're not getting air anymore.
Wow.
It could get caught in things. It was very, very dangerous. They had to go down in teams of 3, and they would never forget the things they saw. There were bodies in life jackets floating around in the ship now, and the divers had to reach up, grab the bodies, and hug them so that they wouldn't keep floating up. They would find a window that they could break and get rid of all glass and debris. Then they would carefully push the body through the open window so that they could float to the surface. If a body was found without a life jacket, 2 divers. One diver would have to wrap their arms around this dead body, and the second diver would have to pull them through a rope to the surface. Wow. The divers said they found many of the students hugging each other, holding each other, or tied together. They said how hard it must have been for those kids. With the cold water rushing in and the darkness coming over them, I thought to myself, why did I even offer to volunteer with this if I can't even save one life? Most of the students had broken fingers. They tried till their very last moment to break the doors or windows to escape. breaking their fingers in the process. After seeing this, a lot of divers would never be the same. Kim Sang-ul, one of the civilian divers, said he was at home when he watched the news and his diver buddies called him up and was like, you need to get here now. We need to save some kids. So he drove hours from his house in Seoul to the southern coast. He spent 2 months away from his family, risking his life to squeeze into these small openings, these dangerous conditions, to find bodies. They worked in 3-hour shifts.
He did it for 2 months?
2 months.
For 2 months?
3 hours of rest.
Oh my God, y'all. This is so tragic. I can't believe people, like, especially the ones who just went through this, how to live through, just experiencing this, the weight that I'm feeling on my eyes, my body, just the whole thing. Their fingernails are gone from trying to claw out of the ferry as it's sinking, and they're tied together. And it's just such a scene that almost shouldn't become a movie. It would be almost too tragic. And that's the sad thing about it. This could have been prevented. And that's sometimes the worst part. That is the tragedy. It's when the inevitable is not necessarily always a tragedy, though it can be sad. This is legit one of the biggest tragedies I've ever seen. For a day and age in a place that this shouldn't have happened.
3 hours of diving, 3 hours of rest. But like the other divers, he was having a hard time resting no matter how exhausted he was. The stress of the dives wrecked his body. The anxiety wrecked his body. Finding these water-bloated corpses of children, he said he could never get that image out of his mind, and he had nightmares anytime he closed his eyes.
Oh, that's
He
rough.
said, we were touching each of these children with our bare hands as we brought them up.
Oh.
Even now, I can't hold my wife or children. I can't stand skin. In addition to the psychological trauma he has, he suffered a shoulder injury that needed surgery.
Could you imagine not being able to touch your loved ones because of that trauma that you've experienced of, oh my God, I can't even get more into that. That's next level PTSD. I never even thought someone could go through that PTSD so bad that you couldn't touch the skin of your loved ones.
So while he was diving, a luggage compartment in the Sewol broke open and massive luggage tumbled straight onto his shoulder.
Oh.
He had to get surgery, and he says he drinks every day now. He just drinks because it's his medicine.
That's his
In
medicine.
the end, his biggest regret isn't even volunteering. His biggest regret was getting there too late.
He
said, I couldn't even save one person. Many of the civilian volunteers, they all went through so much. So 43-year-old Kim Kwan-ong, he helped bring back 25 bodies.
Wow.
At one point, he lost consciousness during a dive, got swept away in the current, was saved, had to go to the ER for treatment. He stayed in the hospital for 3 days. The minute he got back out, he was back in the water.
Oh my God.
He went into places where the Coast Guard weren't even attempting to go, not even pretending like they were going to go. He went to places the Coast Guard deemed too dangerous, and he brought back children in his arms. He said, the victims were tangled together in their utter terror, and I prayed and cradled each one of them as I brought them up. The divers did their best while the country did nothing. The country did nothing, especially for the divers. Do you know what the divers got in exchange for their contribution? Nothing. Okay, his only thing that he got, the only reason he did this was for the families of the victims.
Yeah.
To give them closure.
That's what being a hero is.
And to do right by the children of the nation. But his body was wrecked. He cannot dive anymore. He has mounting hospital bills. He has paralysis in his left thigh. The government refused to deem the 39 injured civilian divers during the search operations as wounded by righteous causes, which would allow them to get health benefits and not have medical bills. In fact, the government actually turned their back on volunteer divers.
What?
They tried to charge a few of them for negligence when a diver died during a mission. They said, well, it's because of you other divers didn't check his equipment. But the Coast Guard was never held accountable. Divers had to go to court to explain, I am not responsible for another diver's death. I'm just volunteering to save bodies. The divers that all tried while the Coast Guard did nothing, they were being used and abused. In 2015, Kim testified about the trauma that he suffered from handling all the dead bodies during the rescue efforts. He said he cannot forget it. He will never forget it. And in 2017, He took his own life.
Oh my
His final
gosh.
text to his loved ones were, "I'll see you in a better place in the next life. I'm sorry." So you're mad, I'm mad, okay? Let's all be mad at someone. And there's a whole lot of people to be mad at in this case. Cheonghaejin Ferry Company, the Coast Guard, the former president, and mainstream media. So let's talk about Cheonghaejin Company first. The ferry company,
please.
this is the connection to the last episode if you listen to it, and the ferry company's sick obsession with overloading the cargo on their ferries. So this particular ferry, this Sewol, had a capacity of holding 90 vehicles. On that day, there were 124 cars and 56 trucks.
Jeez.
Wow.
None of them were
170.
properly secured. None of them were even tied down. They were just driven onto the cargo port and just left on park. They also took in more cargo than allowed for that size of a boat. Their maximum cargo hold is 987 tons, but they took in 1,157 tons, again, none of which was tied down.
Do we know why the person at the beginning turned the boat so much? 15 degrees?
Unclear to this day. We think it's incompetence. Just straight up was
Straight up
trying to do
incompetence.
5 but turn 15 because it's manual steering. And I'll tell you why we think it's incompetence, because no one was trained. Like none of the crews were trained. Oh,
I think
and
that's
side
an
note,
easy one to think.
Not all big boats are like that. Many big boats can turn at even higher degrees and be
Right.
fine.
Okay.
But this specific boat, it was like a industry known thing between this company that this boat can only turn 5 degrees because it's unbalanced. It's not a universal boat thing. It's like this boat
It was
can
just
only
this?
turn 5 degrees.
Oh my god.
No, it's not good to do a lot of degrees of turns, but still, this is crazy. The boat starts leaning to the left, which causes all the cargo and all the cars to slam to the left, which starts leaking in tons of water. Now, remember the ballast water that I was talking about? We have some exact measurements here. Like I
Really?
said, it serves a very important purpose. It keeps the center of gravity low. But there's another thing that it does. So it's actually compartmentalized, the water. It's not just like one big water tub. It's like you have the left tub and the right tub, and I'm simplifying it. And then in between these two tubs, you have these pumps. So what happens is if the boat starts leaning to the left, you start pumping this water to the right tub,
yes.
okay,
That makes
to
sense.
balance it out.
Okay.
The pumps were broken.
The pumps were broken?
That is, I can't even describe to you how bad that is. The pumps were broken, and not only that, there's like a mathematical equation to figure out how much ballast water is needed to offset the cargo weight.
Oh,
Typically,
gosh.
it's around the 2 times mark, meaning
Okay.
you need double the water for the cargo. So if there's 100
Wow.
pounds of water, you can only have 50 pounds of cargo.
That makes sense.
Okay? In this case, the Sewol was carrying about 580 tons of ballast water. For the amount of cargo they had, they needed 2,000 tons of
Oh my
ballast water. They had
God.
a fourth.
A fourth.
So it's completely off.
Completely off.
And that's what they started with. Okay? The crew actually pumped out hundreds of tons of water from the bottom to accommodate additional cargo when they were loading. And as the boat goes, you actually lose more ballast, like water, because part of that compartment is fuel. So as your boat is going, you lose fuel because you're using the fuel. So it becomes lighter. That's why you need extra water. So let's work our way up the
Wow.
food chain. The first people at fault were the captain and the crew. Not all
Yes.
the crew, but many members of the crew. Crewmates were
not all of them.
investigated for their abysmal handling of the evacuation, and one crewmate in particular was told verbatim by authorities, remember, to go tell everyone to put on a life jacket. Yeah, well, he didn't do it. He was just like, oh yeah, I told them. But he just walked around the deck and was like, okay, yeah. What's crazier is that all the crew members that were on the bridge with the captain, they all left with him. They were some of the first to be rescued. But that also meant nobody else was on the bridge anymore to keep open communication with rescue
Exactly.
efforts. So them leaving the boat wasn't just bad that they were abandoning the boat, but there was no one to communicate with them on the boat.
Yeah.
So all these Coast Guards are like, we're trying to talk to people on the boat, but like nobody's on the boat. Because you guys are all here.
Well,
That's cool.
and no wonder they thought no one was there. But then why is none of these crews telling how many kids are in there? Everyone was that ashamed. Like, how do people keep their mouth shut that well? I don't understand that as someone that maybe has a hard time biting my tongue sometimes. But how could you go, like, do all these people not have kids themselves? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
A former U.S. Coast Guard investigator believes if those announcements of every passenger to stay in their cabin were not made, the passengers most likely, just human nature, would have gone to the deck to see what was going on.
Yeah.
Then they would have become easily visible and more easily accessible to rescuers.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it's heavily discussed and speculated how much of this announcement played a role in the deaths. Passenger Koo, a survivor, said that the passengers were trapped inside by windows that were very hard to break. He said he actually wanted to escape earlier, but those nonstop announcements kept telling him to stay put. He said the rescue was horrendous. We were all wearing life jackets. We all had time. If people had jumped into the water, they could have been rescued from the water.
Right.
Another survivor said, the announcement told us to stay put, but the ship was already sinking. There were a lot of students who didn't get out of the ship in time because of those announcements. Okay, fine. So the captain and these crew members, minus a few of the hero crew members, they are horrendous, but how do they f up so majorly? Like, that doesn't even make sense. How do you even not have a loose plan on what to do in situations like this? That brings us to the company that owns the Sewol Ferry, Cheonghaejin Marine Company. Cheonghaejin Marine is like a different kind of evil, okay? This is in connection with our last episode. Cheonghaejin's company's biggest shareholders are owned by another company that is controlled by a billionaire church leader founder, Yoo Byung-eun's two sons.
Wow.
And in recent years, it was discovered that the Yoo family received a total of at least $3.82 million from the ferry company. They got paid out, like about $4 million from this ferry company. And you're like, okay, that's great, right? That means the ferry company is doing well. No, the ferry company was in financial ruins. The year before the sinking, they reported a loss of $800,000 that year. They were cutting down on spending because the bottom line wasn't making sense. And you know where they were cutting down on spending? It was not to give their shareholders money. It was in the training and safety department of employees and new hires. Prosecutors discovered that so much money was being funneled to the billionaire family, nothing was left for the actual company. Nothing was left to train the employees. The company was so starved of funds that they spent only $2 on the safety training for the Sewol's crew members. $2. You get hired, the company spends $2 to train you. And do you know what that money was spent on? It was not an actual training. The $2 was spent to buy a fake paper certificate that said you are now qualified to be a crew member.
Oh my
You've done your safety
God.
courses. Life jackets, life rafts were left uninspected from the 90s. And the life jackets weren't even stored where they were supposed to be, which is on the upper decks or near evacuation points. They were stored in the passenger cabins. Crew members who worked for the company admitted in interviews they would have had no clue what to do in case of an emergency. They've never had an evacuation training or a drill. To put it in perspective how horrendous that is, the U.S. Coast Guard regulations require passenger vessels to hold an abandoned ship drill and fire drill every single week. And it's not even like a
like, at least where I'm from in school, in Canada, we had so many drills, like fire drills, maybe bomb drills, so on and so forth, to how to evacuate properly in the school. So, like, when you're going even as this type of a school event too, you think there would have been some safety procedures even for them too, but everything was just so shot off the head because no one thought anything ever could possibly happen. That's why, like, you can't just be pessimistic. Optimistic, because you have to sometimes be pessimistic to prepare correctly in case something like this can happen. So again, if it weren't for the civilians here, we wouldn't have had any of this footage, any of some survivors too. So it's just very happy to see that some people rose to the occasion on this one and drove many miles and lost a lot. Some have lost their lives even from this.
Haha, we did it moment. You have to lower a lifeboat onto the water and start the engine of that lifeboat. That is the full drill. So it's a full-scale drill. Clearly, the Sewol did not do this, and Korean Coast Guards never regulated or followed up to any of the drills or training. But that still doesn't explain why the ship sank. Well, we have the overloading of the cargo, we have the ballast water, but there's actually more.
Really?
All of that is making the balance of this boat just unstable, okay? It's becoming more and more top-heavy. The center of the gravity is not good right now. But it was worse because Cheonghaejin bought the Sewol Ferry from another company, and modified it and added 2 more levels on top to
Oh.
accommodate passenger cabins, which would bring in more money for them, raising up the center of gravity even more, making it extra top heavy, which you don't want. They also underwent major renovations to create an art gallery where, you guessed it, they housed Mr. Yoo Byung-eun's art, or should I say Ahe's art, that he would sell to
Really?
them at inflated prices.
Oh,
In the
God.
boat?
In the boat, there was an art gallery with, also more weight was added because they added these marble slabs, thick marble slabs, to showcase his work. And the company knew that what they were doing was dangerous. You can't even act like they were ignorant, because it was discovered that between 2003 and 2011, Chonghae-jin had 5 crashes prior to the sinking of the Sewol Ferry.
Oh, wow,
It was
okay.
even recommended that their license be suspended or revoked, but that never happened. They actually purchased more ferries after 2011. They were also asked in 2003 to stop using the Mangol Channel because you don't know what you're doing in there. You guys were in an accident in there. But they continued to use it because it shaves off a precious 7 miles on the trip to Jeju, which is 7 miles of fuel that they're saving on. Also in 2011, Chonghae-jin Company tried to board a passenger ferry, I think in the Han River, where it's during holiday season. The maximum capacity for that ferry was 200 people. They tried to board 500, and the only reason that a tragedy didn't occur is because passengers on board threatened to riot. They were like, no, you're not going to board that many people. This is insane.
Wow.
But that's how blatant they
good.
were in bending the rules and putting lives in danger. Dock employees had even complained that anytime they helped load or unload the Sewol, it would just roll around in the water. Company officials decided Sewol should be sold because of the complaints and the safety concerns, but that was vetoed by Mr. Billionaire Yoo Byung-eun himself. The executives instead started repeating the new mantra for the company, which was load as much cargo as possible. None of the cargo was ever chained or lashed down, meaning it would just smash around. The saddest part to all of this is that all the overloading of the Sewol, it brought in an extra $3 million. That is $10,000 for every passenger that died. That is it.
That's it.
$10,000 for a life. What's insane is that there's regulators for these things. You can't just start a maritime company and be like, okay, well, I'm going to do whatever I want on my boats. There's regulators. The Korean Register of Shipping was an agency that's responsible for these things. They never followed up or facilitated inspections. Thankfully, many of those inspectors and regulators are in prison.
Wow,
and so now,
good.
you know, we know that Mr. Yoo Byung-eun's children, the billionaire kids, if you guys have watched the last episode, they were also in prison, and Mr. Yoo, the billionaire, was found suspiciously dead in his apricot orchard during the nationwide hunt for him immediately after this.
Oh,
Jeez.
that was the time.
Yes. Like right after this, everyone was like, what the hell is going on with Chonghae-jin? They're like, who owns Chonghae-jin? Oh, the major shareholder is this random company. Well, who owns that company? There was a manhunt. Now, it is speculated, and I think all these people should be in jail, by the way, but it
Me
is
too.
speculated that the manhunt for them was a very smart tactic for the President Park at the time, because she was putting a lot of heat on the family versus government response. She was saying, I mean, government response was bad, but like, this is the reason it even sunk in the first place. Yeah, so the corruption and incompetence does not end there. What about the Coast Guard? I mean, I don't think I need to reiterate how badly they dropped.
You don't have to reiterate anything. To be honest, a lot of this is so self-explanatory that the explanation is the thing that then can drive you mental. A lot of the times you see your kids or your partner or your friends even do something that's just so ridiculous that you almost don't even want to acknowledge it. And that's kind of where the government was here. We screwed up so bad that we do not want to acknowledge this. But when you got parents kicking and screaming for justice and it could have been saved, it doesn't matter at this point. So anything you're going through watching this video with me, honestly, making it this far, congrats on yourself. This is a wear and tear on the mind, body, and soul because of just experiencing everything that everyone went through. And I'm always gonna even have that image in my mind of them grabbing the kids' lifeless bodies, just mushy skin and all that. can't imagine trying to get out of that nightmare. And that's really sad as someone who does dream all the time. I know if that happened to me, I wouldn't be able to escape from it either. So, wow. Went and quickly checked on the family, gave them some nice love and some hugs. You probably heard them in the background there. Now we're back here to finish off the final quarter of this amazing documentary about the Sewol Ferry tragedy.
The ball on this, but it was horrendous. Like, they should be ashamed to even wear a uniform. The first rescue vessel, Coast Guard vessel 123, they went to the ferry and they waited 20 minutes before they even rescued the captain. Because they're like, well, we got here, but we don't know what to do. So they just sat around until someone was like, I guess you could send a small boat and try to rescue someone. Do you see anyone? They're like, yeah, we see some people on the deck. They're like, okay. It was also revealed that the Coast Guard not only refused to rescue people essentially, but they made it harder for civilians or other nations to help.
Yeah.
So when civilians came and they're like, I'm going to try to rescue people, the Coast Guard was like inspecting their stuff, looking at their stuff. Like, I don't think you shouldn't do that. Where's your license? Do you have a fishing license, or were you out here illegally fishing?
Wow.
I'm trying to save people. I'm trying to do your job. They're like the parking ticket police, and people are dying. They also were so bad. Eventually, once it was deemed that everyone was dead, the U.S. Navy and a lot of their professional divers were brought in to recover a lot of the bodies that were hard to find. The U.S. Navy took one look at how the Korean Coast Guard was handling things and said, unless you fix this list of insanely abysmal conditions of safety, we are not sending a single American in there. So the U.S. Navy and professional divers were finally, after like months, asked to come in and rescue some bodies. Not rescue, but recover bodies.
Recover the bodies, yeah.
The U.S. said, okay, fine, we'll go take a look. The Navy looks around where the ferry had sank. They have a list of the most egregious safety violations that they'd ever seen. And they're like, we are not sending a single American into the water unless you fix all of this first. And the Korean Coast Guard was like, then I guess we'll just figure it out ourselves.
Wow.
They just refused to make it safe for anyone to dive. It was bizarre. The U.S. Navy was like, this is bizarre. Just how
beyond bizarre, because they already first told them we don't need your help when it was actively a chance to save the kids. And now when it comes to the recovery time, now you ask for their help. And then they're the ones telling you, well, no, now everyone's dead. We're probably going to die trying to just recover from how unsafe this is, and you just need to go and do this, and then we will. And they still didn't. So that's just straight narcissism. And if you let a narcissist run a country, then there's going to be some insane casualties at the bottom. And it's the most humble people, because if we remember, in the BTS Spring Day music video, it was also a contrast to Snowpiercer and how the most humble people were in the back. And it's all these humble people that ended up losing their lives who were trying to be the heroes. And it's intense to see how well woven this incident really has impacted the Koreans itself.
Professional and unsafe, and ultimately how annoying you're making this and impossible for people to even help you. Like, you can't do your job, but now you're making it impossible for me to do your job. Ridiculous. Now, another thing about the Coast Guard, remember the Mokpo Coast Guard where the first helicopter comes and saves someone, right? Well, another helicopter comes in to save people, and they don't really ever save people, because he's just a helicopter driver. He actually asked the head chief of the Mokpo Coast Guard to like get in his helicopter so that they can save people. And the chief was like, oh, I'm really tired from last night's work, and I feel like the helicopter noise is going to give me a headache. So he just sent one of his officers who just circled around the ferry the whole time. And then once all of this starts getting leaked,
Gives
you know
me
what
a
a lot of
headache.
these entities do? They start deleting files, mass deleting files, and the Chindo authorities that were also involved, they actually went as far to delete all their CCTV footage from inside their government office building the day of the incident.
Wow.
So at first, only low-ranking officials and government officials were investigated and prosecuted. The families were enraged because, let's be real, in the hierarchical Korean society, you think this low-level intern is making the shots?
Yeah,
like
come
he's
on
making
now.
the calls. He's like, no, we're not sending divers in. You think so? No, absolutely not. So they pushed and pushed, and in the end, President Park was facing so much heat, she announced a plan to break up and defund the Korean Coast Guard. She created a new department, but honestly, it's just a PR move. I'm sure most of the Coast Guard was moved to that new department. And the next president, President Moon, would just revive the Coast Guard in 2017. So nothing really changed. Many more arrests were made. More than 150 regulators, crew members, ship inspectors, and officials were indicted, including the captain of the Sewol Ferry.
Good.
He was charged with murder.
He was charged
And
with
he
murder.
said, I bow my head, and I just thought if people were leaving the ferry without the proper equipment, they would drown or drift away in the water. So that's why he told them to stay put.
Why the don't you stay put then?
Yeah. Because he wasn't wearing a life vest when he was rescued. So why don't you stay put?
이런 지시를 받은 적이 있습니까?
You stay put then.
Yeah.
See, when he got saved, there was no life jacket. That's kind of what I was referring to at the beginning. At least when I see in movies the people who are being saved, I don't remember life jackets on a lot of these people, like even in Titanic. When they're on the plank there, I don't think you see... I can't believe I can't even remember his name. Is it Jack? I think it's Jack. I need to look now. Yes, Jack Dawson. Glad we're right, but he didn't have no life jacket, no, though it maybe would have saved him there. That's for sure. He sunk.
Because he wasn't wearing a life vest when he was rescued. So why don't you stay put?
이런 지시를 받은 적이 있습니까?
Were you ever ordered to set up a plan
So why don't you stay put?
이런 지시를 받은
to save the
적이
passengers
있습니까?
on the ferry? I don't remember.
With that much guilt and also public hate and scrutiny and a criminal trial, I would rather have died on the boat. So I just think it's so fascinating that some people have such a strong will to live that you would rather kill people to live. Nobody cared what he had to say. In the end, he was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment.
Wow,
he
he
was later
got life
acquitted and
imprisonment.
received
Dang,
36
acquitted?
years in prison instead.
What?
Yeah.
And only
He was
got
saying-
36?
He was saying, okay, everyone is shifting, even in the criminal trials, this is crazy. Everyone is shifting blame. So he's shifting the blame and saying, yes, I shouldn't have left the boat. I shouldn't have given these orders. But ultimately, everybody died because the Coast Guard didn't rescue them. The Coast Guard is saying everybody died ultimately because they were told to stay in their cabins.
Right.
So this is what they're doing. I know. This is what he looks so disgusted right now. This is what they're doing.
Wow. Like just for that, I think he deserves another life sentence
Yeah.
on top.
Like just the audacity of these
Yeah.
things. So there were criminal charges levied against 399.
That's good to know because I didn't know his future, what happened after this. So I'm glad that they alluded to that as Rotten Mangoes definitely would have. Rotten Tomatoes is something different that I'm sure y'all know.
People, including the imprisonment of 154 people. 6 survivors from Tanwon High School were subpoenaed for their testimony during the criminal proceedings, and they said, a ferry with about 300 passengers, most of them students, is sinking fast. But instead of staging full-out rescue efforts, the crew members are nowhere to be seen, and the Coast Guard is just watching from afar. 30 students lined up for the emergency exit. The rescue teams didn't arrive, so we started jumping into the water. But eventually, the water got too close and the emergency exit was no longer available to open. We were waiting to jump. We saw the Coast Guard within arm's reach. They were on the other side of that emergency exit. And we were screaming at them that we're right here, but they just watched. Parents were understandably infuriated with all of this, with all these people and entities, but there was still the problem of the missing bodies. So by the summer of 2014, more rescue teams were sent in, and bodies, at first, there were more found, and of course, it was few and further in between. But at one point, a body was found in an area that the divers already claimed that they had searched multiple times. So let's say they said they searched room B on the 3rd floor. They said, we searched that like 10 times. And then a body was found by a rescue diver in room B on the third floor. So, of course, it brings the question of competency of the recovery efforts yet again. Another body was found, a high school student in a bathroom that had allegedly already been searched 13 times according to official records. So what the hell is going on
What
here?
is
13
going on?
times it showed that it was searched by the Coast Guard.
Right.
The distrust was only growing stronger, and it's not just people, the divers that are losing the trust of the parents, but it's also the Coast Guard
Everyone's
forensics
just lying.
teams. So the way that they would do it is these Coast Guard divers would dive into each room of each level and they would collect a water sample. They would bring this water sample up and then collect another water sample at the surface of the water. They would then test these water samples, and I guess there's certain bacteria or something in the water they're looking for that indicates there are human remains in that room.
Okay.
But if it's a match to the surface water, that means that there is no corpse in that area. So they said they checked it 13 times. The bathroom water was tested 2 to 3 times. And each time it showed that it was the same and consistent as the surface water. A volunteer diver found the girl in the bathroom. It is heavily implied that these Coast Guard divers were lazy and just collected 2 samples from the surface of the water and said one was from the bathroom down in the boat, one was from the surface water. Oh, they're a match. There's no body in there. We're doing so well. Nothing is going right. The authorities didn't get one thing right, and the dives were getting even more dangerous. And there are actually a lot of more deaths that are associated with this that are not including like the 300 on board. A Navy officer was injured and passed away. An Undyne Marine named Mr. Lee passed away during a dive, which I know that we talked badly about Undyne, but that's the company, not the employee's problem.
Yeah.
He was actually diving when he just lost contact with everyone on surface. So his colleagues went into the water. He was found dead. Yeah, his air supply cords were tangled and he was unconscious without his diving equipment on. It's not really clear what happened. An x-ray of his chest showed no irregularities, but a scan showed that his skull was filled with air. Now, a few weeks later, another civilian diver passed away. July of 2014, a helicopter from rescue operations crashed, killing all 5 officers on board and injuring a high school student. There was another death linked to the sinking that shocked a lot of people. The vice principal of Tanwon High School, Vice Principal Kang, he was found hanging from a tree near Chindo Island. So this is the island where all the parents had gathered, and it said that he was the leader of this school trip. He was in charge of the kids' safety. He was rescued, but over 250 of his students were not. He wrote in his note that he feels guilty and he wants to take responsibility for what happened. He wrote that the trip was his idea, and he cannot live without knowing where his students are. He wrote in the letter that he wonders if he could still be their teacher on the other side. In death. He asked his ashes to be scattered around where the ferry went down.
Wow.
Now, the sad part is, before his death, a lot of parents took their anger out on him, and so did a lot of Korean news media outlets, like a lot of adults. But when he passed, students and survivors alike, they went to his memorial in uniform and paid their respects and said he was an ethics teacher. So I wonder if it was really hard for him. He was a good person and he really cared for students. I don't think anyone should be blaming him. Again, another instance where I feel
all the adults want to point fingers and push blame, where this, I mean, it's a school trip, y'all. I remember school trips for me were canceled in elementary school, and then randomly they came back and everyone was so excited, but they got taken away because of the risks that can happen, you know? But the best thing about a school trip is that it gets you outside of the school with the community that you are building inside of the school. And that's like why those trips are so memorable. You get in a different location with all these people, and that's why they look so happy in those pictures going into this ferry. So it's not wrong for the teacher to want to have a trip like this to change their lives, because these trips really can change lives. I'm thinking about these trips that changed my lives growing up too. So it's rough that he got put to the point of suicide just because of how much pressure everyone put on him just for making this. And like, I wonder how many people don't go on school trips now, even just from the effect of what happened here. And I mean, I guess you couldn't blame some people for being overcautious after this, but especially if you don't trust your own institutions and governments after something like this.
Cared for students. I don't think anyone should be blaming him. Again, another
Yeah.
instance where I feel like a child is sometimes more wise than an adult. After the memorial, the hearse carrying his body circled around the school one last time. He was survived by his wife and 3 children. At least 3 parents have taken their own lives after losing their children in the
3
Sewol
parents
Ferry.
have.
One of the
Wow.
fathers took his life on the 1-year anniversary of the Sewol Ferry tragedy. Many families have completely disintegrated, divorced, fallen into addictions, financial distress.
Yeah.
One mom said, "You just have to cry when it's hard. There's no way around it. No one, nothing can console you or help you. When I miss my son, I go lie in his bed and I hug his pillows and I smell his smell and I cry." Many families have left their children's room exactly the way it is, not touching a single thing, almost as if these students are going to walk in through their door with their backpack. Most families hate spring. April is like the best season in South Korea. They hate it. One victim's mom said her husband, the victim's father, has these intense nightmares. And she said, "My husband constantly has nightmares, kicking his leg, even grabbing me by the collar. And one night when I hugged him, he just let out these screams and he cried like a baby. He just looked so lonely." Many siblings of victims fell to self-harm and depression. One sister has her birthday on April 19th, and for years, it was too hard, too painful for her to even celebrate. And for the first time, she asked her parents if they would like to join her for dinner for her birthday. So it's been very rough for these families, rescue personnel, but also the survivors. Survivors' guilt is a scary, scary thing. I think it's confusing. Like, how do you even process that type of emotion? There was a 71-year-old woman who was eating breakfast when she heard screaming. She saw people just sliding down the floor, so she grabbed a railing and saw everyone tumble like dominoes. She remembers going into shock, but this young man grabbed her arm and screamed, "Come on, hold on to me tightly." She was trying to let go and slide down with everyone because she was so exhausted. She's 71, but she's like, no, I can't hold on any longer. She said she was exhausted, but this young man never gave up on her and kept holding her arm. He grabbed her and pulled her up. He failed, so he pulled her up again, and this time it worked. He escorted her to the rescue boats, and she would not have made it out without him. She wanted to ask for his name, but it was so chaotic. He was just gone. Her 4 friends she was traveling with for this Jeju trip, her 4 friends died. She suffered a broken back, and she said, "I'm grateful. I want to thank that young man. I want to buy him a meal or at least hold his hand or give him a hug. What else can a lady like me do? But how could it be that an old woman like me survives and all these young people are still in there? It is such a shame." Civilians very early on realized that they were being lied to, so they tried to show their support to the parents with yellow ribbons. Even while news outlets are still lying, civilians tied yellow ribbons everywhere to show their support, to show parents, we know and we are supporting you. Since then, yellow ribbons have been used to symbolize mourning for the Sewol Ferry victims, but it's almost now become synonymous with skepticism against the government and standing up to corruption. A lot was exposed about high government officials when this case broke, like how President Park was unavailable for up to 7 hours during the initial incident.
Jeez.
So not only was she unavailable, but her and her administration falsified schedule records to show that she was on official duties at the time, which she was not. Which, even if you're on official duties, I'm sorry, your nation's children are dying on a boat, get it together, it can wait. She just wasn't involved. I guess I don't know if she wasn't alerted, or I don't know if she wasn't making enough calls, so now all these officials are covering for her, or her administration is covering for her. Now, President Park's administration was also exposed for bullying and threatening reporters and news networks for reporting on the truth. They even indicted a Japanese reporter who shit on her for handling this tragedy in the way that she did, and Japan slammed South Korean prosecutors, and the chief cabinet secretary of Japan said, freedom of press should be respected, and that indictment was far out of the norms of the accepted wisdom in the international community. So it's clear, the president cares about her appearance domestically and oddly very much so internationally, and that's it. And when she decided she was sick of people calling her out for her vile, disgusting behavior, she said this about the Sewol tragedy. It's time to overcome the pains and hardship from the Sewol incident and move on to build a new South Korea. We cannot stay trapped in the sadness and frustrations that have gripped us for the past year.
Oh my
At this
gosh.
point, bodies were still being recovered. Not everyone has been put to rest yet. She was later impeached for corruption. This is a
Good.
big part of it. Her ratings dropped drastically after this. And shamanism, oddly, were the reasons that she was impeached. We have a video on
Shamanism.
it, but anyway, not a great person. In the end, 9 bodies were still missing in the incident, and the parents stood by each other to make sure those victims came home to be laid to rest, which would ultimately lead to the Sewol being salvaged from the bottom of the seafloor, but it took a very long time to get there. The parents requested that the Sewol ferry be salvaged immediately because evidence, the bodies are intact. Like, we need to do this, right? There are speculations that the government went out of their way to come up with a million reasons on why this was impossible. It's theorized that they were scared that the evidence would show incompetence. One big thing that got a lot of people mad was that out of 172 survivors, more than half of them were rescued by fishing boats and other civilians and or commercial boats that had nothing to do with the government. One survivor said, "I wonder why the rescuers who first got to the ship didn't do anything about 100 or 200, I think, were trapped inside. They were just picking up the ones at the top." Now, can we talk about the salvaging of the ferry real quick? Okay, this is crazy. 2 months, I think it was like 2 months after the sinking of the ferry, 7 private...
I'm sorry, y'all. There is so much to process in this one. I don't have a lot more words with going through so much emotion here. I'm sure I'm going to have more, and it's easier when you take a pause to then say it. But while it's happening now and she's talking, it's really hard to speak while it's going. So I'm going to have to pause it anytime I have a thought now, just to make sure it actually will come out. Again, thank you for making it this far with this grind. I'm sure this is a very long video, and if you've seen this before, I don't know how you're watching it for a second time. So I really thank you if you are watching it again with me. It really does mean a lot, because this has been enlightening. I think the whole world needs to see this. It's insane that that guy got 36 years only for this, the captain. So I'm still glad he got something at least.
companies brought in proposals. So this happens a lot with these sometimes natural disasters, sometimes national disasters. These private companies will bring in proposals, and it was 7 maritime companies that said, hey, we have a way to salvage the ferry. This is how we're going to do it. This is option A, this is option B, this is option C, and this is how much we would charge the government to do it. Thank you. That's our proposal. It's almost like a government bid. All these companies are trying to get this deal so that they can salvage the ferry. Now, one company in particular had a very unique plan. The problem with salvaging this ferry was not, oh, let's just lift it up by cranes and then bring it ashore. It's not like that. It's so complicated because you have bodies in there. You have evidence in there. You want to keep these bodies as intact as possible. So there's a lot that you're working with, and it's in the channel, the Mangor channel, so there's a lot. So their plan was to tilt the boat onto its side again, because right now it was like inverted.
Right.
Tilt it to its side, crane it onto a floating vessel, and salvage it there. That was like their plan. The government reads this proposal like 2 months after the sinking. Everyone says, when are you going to salvage the boat? They said, we have to do tests. We have to find the perfect solution. You guys, you don't understand because you don't know, but it's so hard. You know, this is in the water. It's very, very sensitive issue. We need to make sure none of the evidence gets lost. We need to make sure the bodies are intact. So it's going to take some time. We need to do a lot of tests. A year later, the government comes out and says, after a year of that, we have amazing news. We have found the best solution. They take credit for the solution that they had on their desks 2 months after the sinking, and they pretty much copy that proposal word for word. And that was exposed by Newstapa.
Good job,
Parents of
Newstapa.
victims gathered together in front of government buildings to stage a hunger strike, not for money, but for the truth. They just wanted answers on how something like this could have happened.
Yeah.
For months, the country mourned with them. And there's a moving story about a father who ate nothing but water and salt for 46 days.
Wow.
The president still had some supporters, super conservatives, that came out to eat pizza and fried chicken in front of the parents who were hunger striking.
Rough.
I don't know why they defended the president. Like, that's
Why?
your mom or something. I don't know why anyone defends any politician regardless of what their beliefs are, so vehemently. Like, I mean, it's crazy. One parent stated, "I don't need money, compensation, or trauma therapy. I just need the truth, please. That's all."
That's it.
And he formally bowed in front of lawmakers, begging for them to help. Families of victims even shaved their heads in public in a demonstration. They just wanted to put their family members to rest. And the government just kept asking, "So you want compensation?" "No, we want to find our family members." Finally, the ferry was salvaged 3 years later. There were 9 missing passengers at that point, and only partial remains would be found in the salvaging. Many of the victims were put to rest 1,000 days after the tragedy. But by the end of October 2018, 5 people are still missing.
5 are
2
still missing.
16-year-old students,
Wow.
a 57-year-old teacher, a 48-year-old father, and the 7-year-old boy. Remember the older brother of the 6-year-old sister? They are still missing. The families of all the victims would receive approximately $177,000 for each victim lost, which is absolutely nothing. I mean, first of all, they didn't even want it in the first place, but it's absolutely nothing. 71 days after the Sewol sinking, survivors returned to school. And before the tragedy, the sophomore class of Tanwon had 325 students. Now there were 75
Oh my gosh.
in that class. All 75 were provided group therapy as part of the class time. 10 counselors were brought in to be readily available. And students at Tanwon said, "Every student here knows someone who has died or has gone missing." Like, just imagine the depth, like the web of trauma left behind.
The web of
One
trauma.
student says, "Our school feels so empty now. It's not an environment where we can study. I wake up every morning hoping it's a lie, but it's not." And I will say that when tragedy does strike, Korea is a nation that at least the civilians come together. The government, wow, but the civilians do come together in honor of the Sewol tragedy. All K-pop groups, every single one, stopped the release of all new music and promotions. The whole entertainment industry was at a standstill. Most industries in South Korea were at a standstill. There were no ads, no promotions for anything. And once the mourning period was over, BTS came back with a song called Spring Day, directly inspired by Sewol. The translated lyrics read, "I miss you even though I'm looking at your photo. Time is a cruel thing. I want to go to the other side of the earth holding your hand. How long do I have to wait? How many nights do I have to pass to see you, to meet you? Until spring day comes again, until the flowers bloom again. Please stay here a little longer." Another K-pop artist dedicated his concert to a fan that had purchased tickets to be there, but she passed on the Sewol ferry. Shin Young-jae, of 4Men, finished and produced a song called "You Whom I Love," and the song was written by one of the teenagers that passed on the Sewol. His name is Lee Da-eun, and he wanted to be an artist one day. He plays the guitar, he writes his own lyrics, and his idol, his role model in life was Shin Young-jae. After the Sewol tragedy, his parents reached out, just not really expecting anything, but he finished the song and performed it in honor of all the victims. The lyrics translated are, "To you who has suffered so much, you went through a lot, right? I want to hold you in my arms, and right now I hope you're dreaming sweet dreams. But we're sleepless at night thinking of you. I wish you could relax, but just know that I will always be here with you, right next to you." Many artists and idols wore yellow ribbons during performances to honor the victims. But I will end the very long video with this. A family member of one of the victims was asked, "Why do you think this happened? Why do you think the kids weren't saved?" And he said, "People ask that all the time. Why do you think they failed to protect the children? And I think above all, they just had no desire to protect the children. Golden time? All they did was lie." What are your thoughts on this case? And please stay safe, and I will see you guys on Sunday.
That's one of the hardest videos I've ever had to go through. And y'all had to live that. Oh, God. I've never been in a position where I wake up and think it's not real. And the web of trauma, like Rotten Mangoes was saying so eloquently there. What's 10 counselor's going to be able to do. You can't even teach in that environment anymore. Those kids are changed for life now. The mourning that's coming from this, the president asking for everyone to stop mourning after the year because of the guilt that she feels. I don't know what else to say. This is one of the most shocking videos and situations I think anyone's really ever seen. And if you made it all the way through, I really appreciate it. This is the second time for you watching, if you got to see my reaction on Patreon before I got released here on YouTube as well, I really thank you for the support, as well as I luckily do have kids at home, and it definitely does support when you go to the Patreon there too. So if you had a good time with me and you want to see more from Rotten Mangoes, BTS, or anything like this, please let me know in the comments below which way I should move forward. Subscribe if you are new. Hit that notification bell so we can do this together next time. And we are now exiting the rabbit hole, folks. Peace and love. God bless y'all.